This is Park Han-yeol, the biggest supplement addict ever. Vitamins, omega-3, energy drinks, and every kind of drug out there. If they told him eating shit made you stronger, he would eat shit for lunch and dinner every day. One day leaving work, he stopped by the pharmacy, bought his daily fuel, and left. Outside in the sky, he sees a giant spaceship covering the whole city. He thought he was tripping from all the drugs he uses. But when an earthquake hit and monsters started coming out of the ground, he froze. Out of nowhere, his heart started racing, and a system warned that his body nutrients were being activated. The demon strike that should have ripped his head off looked super slow in his vision. He was confused by his own reflexes until it finally clicked. The supplements he took his whole life awakened a power in him. And with this power active, he got way stronger and faster than a normal human. When he grabbed the demon's bat, the other monsters jumped on him. At that moment, he started playing baseball, beating them one by one, and putting them all to sleep. But then a giant demon showed up and things got ugly. He even tried to face this giant monster, but took such a heavy hit that he flew so far, he ended up inside the pharmacy. But unfortunately for the demon, he basically just threw a cannibal inside a morgue. Our protagonist was just sitting there taking a drag from his cigarette. When his power comes back, he rushes the monster and delivers a kick so hard that the demon crashes through the wall and lands across the street. Our white Snoop Dogg takes another drag, feels his body getting buffed, goes for round 2 landing. So many punches that the monster could barely breathe. The demon even tried to fight back, but our boy dodges, throwing a clean punch right back straight in its face. Not satisfied yet, he stomped so hard that he sinks the beast's face into the asphalt. Since devils don't die easily at all, it grabbed the MC by the face and tried to throw a punch, but the MC was smarter, blocked it, and returned a punch straight to the heart. Then the demon finally couldn't tank it anymore and falls down defeated. Thinking the beef was over, he bumps into a bunch of demons still alive and slaughtering the crowd. "Man, I'm dead." A chubby guy runs up to him begging for help, but since he's stuck from the last fight, he can't do anything. That's when a girl shows up flying and throws some cards that create a magic sphere so insane that it blows up all the demons, clearing the map in one hit. The girl walks up to him, scans his energy, and gets shocked to find out that he is an irregular. In this world, there are 3 classes: the celestial linked to the divine, the mundane linked to the ordinary, and the human linked to our own nature. These 3 are already basic knowledge, and the monks know how to counter each one. But there's a bizarre type off the radar. That's the irregular, the exact class of our MC. Scared of the kid's power level before leaving, she shoved a pill down his throat and warned him that stuff was made to nerf his energy center because sooner or later that power would end up obliterating everything around him. Park fell to the ground, pissed and confused. Later at home, he was taking his gasolines trying to process what happened. Out of nowhere, an alert pops up with the president announcing that the city was infested with monsters and telling everyone to lock their doors and stay home. Then the system panel blinks at him, and when he touches it, it opens an insane skill tree. One skill in particular caught his eye: meditation to level up the mana flow in his body. He liked the idea and decided to test it out. The boy spent a long time farming aura in his room. After focusing for a long time, he opened his eyes and sees his room infested with weeds and plants that sprouted from his own body. Groot. When he stands up and checks the current date, he almost passed out because the meditation lasted exactly 100 days. Curious to see how the city was doing, Park went to look out the window and came face to face with a building-sized monster that sent shivers down his spine. The whole city had already turned into an apocalypse, so he decides to camp in his room anyway to level up and understand his skills better. He finds out he has 3 more skills: soft steps, which buffed his speed, a passive that increased his inventory capacity, and light tornado that sends a flare up in the sky. The problem was the light could also attract monsters. He had copied the breathing technique before, so he checked closer. The system said trainees were ranked from 1 to 10 stars, and after 5 stars, they could use nature techniques. Park was shocked to learn ranks could be raised too. Then came the bad news. It took about 10 years to gain 1 star, so reaching nature techniques would take at least 70 years. Even so, he decided to check how many stars he had first. To do that, he had to pour energy into both hands and look at the rings on his left hand. So Park focused his energy there. The number of rings would show his star rank, but what he saw left him stunned. At that exact moment, a monster rushed him. He had to find something useful right away. Within seconds, a tiger-like beast was at his door, and it attacked. His claws ripped into his shoulder. Then Park remembered an old Chinese technique called the absorption method, a skill that steals a beast's life force. He picked an ability similar to that and somehow used a 6th level art. It worked. He brought the beast down, and a green aura wrapped around him. He realized he only lived because he had found such a useful skill. Then he dropped to the floor. The system reported that a muscle had formed, his blood had stabilized, and his red blood cell production had shot up. A green light then spread from his eye. Looking at his hand, Park had no clue what was happening. He could feel a huge amount of energy moving through his whole body. He guessed absorbing the monster had restored his nutrients. That was great news because now he might have enough energy to use the light tornado. Then he noticed plants sprouting from the monster's body. They definitely hadn't been there before, so he decided to collect them in case they were useful. As he moved, he realized he could only use one sprout at a time. If he had time to absorb monsters before killing them, he might do something even better. Still, he didn't want extra trouble. He just needed to survive until rescue came, though he knew he'd probably have to use the light tornado eventually. Then another monster showed up and charged him again. Park used the skill once more and slammed a punch into it. There was no time to rest. He had to get moving and send a rescue signal with the light tornado, but monsters kept finding him. And again, he had no choice but to fight them off. Even then, they just kept coming. After a while, he finally made it to the roof, then he froze at what he found. A gigantic monster was right there beside him. Park thought he had to be losing his mind, and then another monster appeared behind him. Even so, he knew it was all or nothing, so Park charged straight at the giant monster. He fired up light tornado again. After a while, someone called out, asking where Park was. The voice told him to come out right away. Spotting a man flying overhead, Park signaled that he was below. The man asked why he was just standing there. Didn't he have a flying talisman or at least enough power to jump? Park said he only had the 3 talismans he got earlier. Calling him a pain, the man told him to hold out his hand. Park started to answer, then warned him there was a monster behind him. In an instant, the man used a talisman and wiped the monster out with no effort. Then he told Park not to make him say it twice and to give him his hand. He demanded to know who Park was and why he was wandering through a restricted zone and whether he had any wish to stay alive. When Park tried to explain, the man cut him off. He didn't care. Park still thanked him for saving his life. Once he got out of the barrier, Park was shaken by the huge pile of messages from his mother. It made sense. He'd been trapped there for 100 days. Still, he was just glad his mother and relatives were safe. So much had happened, and he couldn't stop wondering how much the world had changed. Later, in a building, Park told his mother he wanted to call again. He played it down, saying he'd only gotten lost and had made it back. He promised he'd see her in a few days. The other man asked if he was done with the call, and Park said yes. At least now he knew his family seemed safe. Not long after, another man burst into the room in a hurry, staring at Park and asking if he was really the person he thought he was. He introduced himself as a disciple serving under the regional unit. Park barely cared and told the other officer to leave. He made it clear, go now and don't make him repeat it. Soon after, the man asked if Park had learned his technique before his heavenly gate even opened. Park said no. Then he asked if Park had somehow awakened his sleeping master. Park only watched him with a cold look. A system window appeared in front of him, and the man asked if Park could see it too. He asked whether it said Ascendant and if there were 9 higher ranks above that. Most awakened people were disciples, often called saints, and mundane was the highest class. But this man had special talent, so under his master, he'd been given the rank of Ascendant. Age and background didn't matter here. Whoever had more disciple training was the senior, not the younger one. So Park was expected to respect his senior. That was the rule. Park asked if Ascendant was the lowest rank and what rank his master was. That annoyed the man who snapped at him for talking about things he didn't understand. He said Park was born with a spiritual physique, so if he wanted to live in this world, he needed protection from his superiors. There would be no second warning. Say something like that again and he'd die. But Park replied that he'd heard no one changed masters 3 times, so maybe the man followed that master just because he liked the way he talked. That pushed the man into a rage. Right then, a system screen popped up with all of Park's information. Park pointed out that the man had said this rank was the one right below Ascendant. Getting to his feet, Park said he'd try his best for his superior. Later, that man argued with his master, asking if he thought he had treated his senior the way he was told and whether he really expected him to hand over the technique he had used. Angry, The master called him a fool, saying he wanted to brag about inheriting a bandit's technique while bowing his head to that boy. The man answered that Park's range of performance was higher than his own, which was why he was considered a high saint. His master said it might be because of Park's body, but the man argued that if so, he could have an irregular physique. That only made him more upset, and he asked if his master would keep saying such nonsense or if he was really claiming the boy was born with a mundane physique like the two of them. The man asked if that meant Park's training would grow faster. The master admitted he didn't know. Seeing a human rise toward nature was rare to begin with. Humans once came from the water, then moved on to land. They learned fire to survive the cold and melted iron to shape it. Even though living things share many traits, their natures still clash. The master said the report was probably because this was an extremely rare case, and if he understood that, he should say nothing about the cultivation method. They'd send a drug, and Park needed to be watched once his breathing settled. To the master, the whole thing was fascinating. He thought Starwind belonged only to people close to nature, so how had he never heard of someone like this? Meanwhile, Park was back home at his computer thinking about the government's claim that not a single person had an irregular physique. Across the world, anyone who showed an irregular result in spiritual or physical testing was isolated. Somehow, Park had avoided that so far. Irregular physiques were spiritual and usually split into three kinds: celestial, mundane, and human. But there was also a fourth, an unpredictable spiritual physique. Even after the saints vanished in the last decade, monsters kept trying to break into the world, so the saints joined forces and drove them out. That was why most people treated them like myths, and there were only two known examples. Park thought that made no sense. Why should he be exiled? It wasn't like he was some famous serial killer. As he drank his coffee, the system announced that the drug had been consumed. It noted that even mixed into brown rice tea, it was shocking to see someone draw out its full effect. Park figured he'd been labeled as having a mundane physique in the spiritual test, which was why they gave him the blue matter from Brazil. He didn't know how long the drug would keep working, so he looked for something with a similar effect, but found nothing he could trust. That made him think the government only let limited information reach the public. Then an idea hit him. He typed drugs into the search bar and found something close to what he needed. Looking at the seeds, he wondered what they really were. Were these the same ones he had seen before? Holding them, Park Haniel remembered he got them while fighting a beast and realized they might be more common than he first thought. After searching online, he found there were no pictures showing those seeds after germination, so he made an anonymous post asking if anyone recognized them. They were called purgatory herbs, plants that naturally grow near the river Styx. Eating them raw makes people sick, and their growing conditions are so strict that sprouted seeds are almost impossible to get. Park, though, thought his had already sprouted, so he decided to test the unsprouted ones. He used solar wind breathing on the seeds, and they started growing right in his hands. Then a man burst into the room yelling, but Park was already gone. The man wondered if he had run off, then searched the place to check whether Park had stolen anything. When he opened the fridge, he found that the boy had taken one of his peaches. Elsewhere, Park kept testing the seeds. Before long, a small tree had grown. Park Haniel said he had only breathed on it for 2 hours, and it had already grown this much. He admired the result, thinking breathing let energy move between him and everything around him. Just as he guessed, the solar wind technique could make plants grow. If he kept raising herbs this way, living as an irregular might not be a problem. Then he ate a sprout from the purgatory herb. As he breathed, heat spread through him similar to the blue matter. But the red aura faded away, and Park wondered if he had messed up, so he tried again. The aura vanished that time too. Park Haniel muttered that he thought so, then got confused. Maybe the blue matter from the void was just a better drug. While chewing another sprout, he tried once more. The red aura came back, but now the heat felt different. That made him remember something he'd read online about energy. The purgatory herb carried energy, while the blue matter from the void was yang. So Park Haniel wondered if he needed a separate absorption method for energy too. If mixed energies clashed inside him again, his life could be in danger like before. Even so, he felt relieved. Despite the weak effect, it still meant his power could grow. Then he pulled up the small tree, but a sudden sound startled him. It was just a message on his phone. It said the Majesty's son had died, warned everyone about the rain, and ordered all residents to evacuate at once. People panicked, asking why no one had warned them sooner. Then the downpour started, and strange growths appeared in the streets. People said it would be safer not to touch them. Park noticed a protective barrier around the building and felt lucky he had followed those people inside. Then someone outside screamed for help. A giant monstrous bird had cornered a woman, and Park was stunned. The bird grabbed her with its claws and tossed her into a nest packed with worms. Then it turned its eyes toward the people inside the barrier. One terrified man said if he had been a little later, that would have been him. Park Han-yeol activated his abilities, thinking it made no sense to let someone healthy die like that. So he stepped out of the barrier and charged the creature. His fist slammed into the bird's head, dropping it to the ground with ease. Park was shocked. He didn't remember being this strong and wondered if the purgatory herbs he ate earlier were the reason. Then he realized the hard rain was actually the Dragon King's tears. After he ate them, the rainwater made the trees grow even bigger and tougher. It boosted his nature energy, and now his power jumped way up. So he uses artifact refinement on the tree, turning it into a demon-slaying weapon. The bird gets back up, furious, and rushes straight at him. Park Han-yeol blocks the charge, knowing one mistake would send him flying. He was almost at the barrier already, so he had to hold firm. A moment later, the creature leaves an opening, and he strikes back at once, but the hit doesn't even leave a mark. That makes him wonder if the demon-slaying blade is the problem. The bird rises again, staring hard at the weapon, then it suddenly goes after the woman instead. Park jumps in and saves her. She thanks him, but he warns her not to relax yet. Seeing them try to get away only makes the bird angrier. It slams into them, and the injured woman barely makes it back inside the barrier. Park Han-yeol isn't so lucky and gets thrown into a wall. He still gets back up. The layered protection kept his bones from breaking even if its effect was fading. Then the monster swoops at him again. He smirks, realizing its huge body makes its flying clumsy, but he also knows he can't make it back to shelter now. The drug is wearing off and he's getting weaker. He considers planting sprouts, but against this monster that would be a long shot. So he decides to use his trump card. The demon-slaying blade is both plant and sword, and it can root itself into the ground. It needs time to trade energy and grow stronger. But with the Dragon King's tears still falling, he can absorb the rain and store the energy of the demon he's fighting to power up the sword. Soon, the blade is filled with lightning. Park Han-yeol charges in and lands a heavy blow. The monster's head slams into a building, and he doesn't waste the chance. He cuts its head clean off. The people watching are stunned that he actually killed it. If the bird had only taken a victim, the authorities probably wouldn't have cared much. But this boy risked himself to save someone, so people start calling him a superhero. Soon, everyone is filming him, then he suddenly gets attacked. A man shows up and demands to know if Park Han-yeol understands what he's done. He had killed Miss Yua's beloved bird, and the man says even burning someone like him wouldn't be enough. A video of the attack quickly spreads online, and criticism starts piling up. One woman asks whether her child had died, and if that man burned the insolent fool who killed her messenger. Her assistant tells her Park Han-yeol has only been detained for now. Yoo-hoo grows annoyed, saying everyone must hate her if they're just keeping that rude boy locked up. In a rage, she orders humans to kill him themselves if they want to avoid her wrath. But her assistant reports that Park Han-yeol's actions are trending, so treating him kindly would be smarter, especially with people already unhappy about the new leadership. Yua complains that this world's rules are no fun and the government's laws are scary. She's sure Vermeer has some way to calm her down, and the maid says she already prepared a tribute to protect Miss Yua's name. Yua says she'll wait for it. Soon after, the rain starts to fade, and she says the Dragon King has eased his grief, so much for transcendent beings being free of desire. Grabbing the package, Yua thinks the only thing that matters is that she got it. Inside was a piece of trunk. That fruit is called the treasure of fantasy even among gods. Its flowers bloom only once every 3,000 years, and the tree grows only in the orchard of the Queen Mother of the West. These were peaches from the Tree of Immortality. Yu explains that when the Queen Mother gave up her life to close the gates of heaven, the orchard vanished. If she could grow a sprout from that bark, her name could replace the Queen Mother of the West. Later, Park Han-yeol walks down the street remembering a man's warning that he had made all the deities look bad and shouldn't do anything flashy again. He looks at his hand and thinks that even though his sword was confiscated, he still gained something from it. That night, he had found a block of wood inside the bird's body. He couldn't understand why that piece had been attached to the monster's ankle, but then he realized the trunk was alive. Right after that, the man showed up, and before getting attacked, Park Han-yeol managed to take a sprout. Now he's wondering if he should try to grow it. A year later, A news report says the government has taken steps to clean the water, but one man still complains about the smell. He says the real problem is the monster, and the government should deal with that first. A month earlier, when celestial energy fell into chaos, a monster hid in the Han River, a 1,000-year-old snakehead fish. After crossing over from the monster world, it grew strong enough to call itself the sovereign of the Han River. Then it declared that no one could use the river water until it received a human sacrifice. Watching the report, a boy jokes that fish must have worm brains. That boy is Yang Ji-ju, a disciple from one of the 8 sacred mountains of the Korean peninsula. Someone immediately tells him to stop making pointless comments in the meeting and sit properly. That was Shinzomin, the youngest disciple from another of the 8 sacred mountains. Yang doesn't care much about the meeting because this isn't something they can solve on their own. And in the end, everything depends on the elders' will anyway. Bawona gets irritated and asks if that's really what his master taught him. 10,000 people have already gotten sick from the water, so she says they need an answer fast. Then she demands to know how he dared insult her master. Yang Giju fires back, asking if she can kill the sovereign of the Han River. For top immortal mystics already failed, so does she want everyone to die to that fish? The real problem is that the sovereign can use both earth and water techniques. Very few people can control 2 techniques like that, so the only real options are an immortal who can force it out with earth power or someone high-ranked in both earth and water. Yang Ji-ju says he won't stop her from trying, but he won't join in. That only makes her mad, and she snaps the presentation remote. After that, the boy leaves to train. He says if anyone can beat that fish, they'll have the answer. Meanwhile, the woman heads into the forest carrying the demon-slaying sword because she remembers that a year ago, a man killed Hugh Wisberg with it. He was jailed for a time and later released, but the sword stayed confiscated by the Immortal Society. It was a rare wooden artifact, and because it looked like a sword, it caused a lot of confusion in heaven. But as the power inside it slowly faded, that attention died down. For the past year, Park Hanul hadn't left Gwanek. Now and then, he only went out with his mother or friends to eat or watch movies. The girl remembers him saying he didn't use phone apps, and after everything he went through, that made sense. Then Park Han-yeol shows up, and the moment he sees her, he turns the corner. Yang Ji-ju thinks she can't let him get away and chases after him, but she still can't catch him, not even at full speed with a talisman. In the end, she loses him. Then Park Han-yeol appears again and asks if she's with the Immortal Society. He says he wasn't trying to run. He was just startled that she was following him. Yang Ji-ju notices he's sweating and wonders why he used only his body instead of a talisman to shake her off. Then she tosses him a phone. The device changes ownership, and Park Han-yeol pulls up his profile. Yang Ji-ju sees that he's still a high immortal, though ranked below her. Park asks if she wants to use his wood element against the sovereign of the Han River, and whether the immortals really want that monster dead. That's how it looks to him. Yang says no. The older members stayed out of it because they want the juniors to solve this without help. Park points out that thousands of people are suffering because of it. Still, he agrees to help and asks what compensation he'd get and whether his sword could be returned. Yang asks how he even knows about that. He explains that through breathing, he can connect with the trees around him. That's what his technique does. She realizes that's also why he could move so fast through the forest. Park says the first thing he wants to know is whether his curfew can be lifted. Yang tells him rewards are possible, but drawing attention is still a big issue, and no one can promise him anything just for helping. She explains that the curfew was first meant to punish him for killing Miss Yua's bird, but that problem might be fixed if she can persuade the right man after Park helps defeat the sovereign of the Han River. Sometime later, Park is already at the riverbank, and the other man asks why they even came here. He isn't sure what Park plans to try, but after all the trouble this place caused, he wanted to see the creature for himself. Yang tells him to calm down since all of this is because of the sovereign of the Han River. He wonders what Park Han-yeol can possibly do here. Pulling an album from his backpack, he thinks it's disgusting. He prepared it for this moment. He just didn't expect to use it so soon. The woman warns him not to go any closer. It's too dangerous. But then she realizes what he's actually doing. Park asks if she never did this in elementary school. He says he used to sprout plants in class. This kind of plant was great at cleaning dirty water. Most of the work was already done. Only a little was left. Then a huge creature rises from the lake. Park grabs his sword and braces himself. He says it's time to go fishing. A deafening roar shakes the area. The beast calls itself the god of the river and says it bows to no one. It lunges at Park and he barely dodges. Right after that, he starts using a spell and throws it at the creature. Enraged, it demands to know how he dared pull a stunt like that. But before it can finish, more shots from Park hit its body and make it even madder. Meanwhile, Yang keeps shielding the others. She's impressed. By using those purifying plants, Park stripped the river sovereign of all its filthy energy. Still, if this kept up, he wouldn't win. The monster says Park may handle hidden energy well, but these cheap tricks mean nothing. It attacks again, sending him toward the lake. But before he falls, he tosses out more seeds to hold himself up, saying this was his last one. When he throws it at the monster, the creature mocks him, saying it was just a tree struck by lightning. It asks if he really thinks that tiny toy can destroy its body. Park says the real toy is the one he planted in its heart, then asks if it can feel it yet. With that, he dives again and says they'll meet once more. As he casts another spell, he says this is a thunderbolt lightning dart he made himself, so there's no way he's letting the creature escape. Electricity tears through the whole area, hits the monster, and a huge blast finishes it off. Park says the air feels a lot cleaner now. Standing on the serpent, he admits he's caused trouble again. Once more, he's drawn too much attention, and this time might end even worse. The mortals had left the Han River Sovereign alone for one reason, training their disciples, not helping regular people. Then he spots what he wanted and thinks it's smaller than expected. Water beasts form reinforced crystals in hopes of becoming a dragon, so he decides to take that inner core as his reward. But suddenly a man snaps at him, demanding to know what he's doing. In an instant, magic pins Park down. The man asks if he understands what he's done. This is the celestial king, Nokusha. Watching from above, the girl recognizes the one restraining Park. She remembers being told to stay quiet until those ungrateful immortals got into trouble and came complaining. Since they showed up now, right after the Han River Sovereign was subdued, she realizes the river's fate has changed. Then she greets the man. She says she didn't know why the seniors had come, and he coldly asks whether this place looked safe or approved to her. He asks if she's Tob's disciple, and she quickly confirms it. Then he presses her. How could a disciple of such a master fail to grasp how serious this is? That boy had trained only 1 year with no master, yet he used a rare with technique strong enough to defeat a sovereign. He asks if she doesn't find that suspicious, then warns her not to speak again unless she wants to shame Tob. Terrified, she understands. Then Park starts laughing. The man asks if he's forgotten fear, but Park just asks why he should panic. Did he really do something wrong, or were they only doubting him because he had an unusual skill? Sadly, this was the second time, so he'd already checked the app. Only 3 minutes had passed since the fish died before they all showed up. Everyone there is confused by what he means. Park says they must have been watching that fish the whole time since they appeared right after it died. Then he asks if they hoped killing it themselves would win public praise. And once that chance to build their image was gone, they rushed over in panic. Now fully annoyed, Park tells them to stop. A blast goes off right after that, and they accuse him of causing it. But then he looks surprised. His attack did nothing. Park says he aimed for the stomach again just like before. Then he raises his sword at the man. The man flies into a rage and asks if Park understands what it means to point a blade at him. He demands Park's last words. Park doesn't buy it. He says the man can't kill him anyway. As he moves to strike, the man says Park's arrogance reaches the heavens. He unleashes his attack and another huge explosion erupts. This time, the man is stunned because someone steps in and stops the fight, saying a watchman should guard the garden. So what was he doing here? That newcomer is Bayek, a high-level immortal from the 3 heavenly realms. Bayek says he came because his lady asked. He hopes he didn't interrupt their show of force, but this looked like pointless violence. From what he can tell, the boy is reckless. Still, if they insist on fighting, he won't stop them. Both sides will just ruin their names. But since the boy has no standing here, they shouldn't block the elder's path. Soon the two vanish, and the man asks why that lady called Elder Beck to save Park. Later, Park walks somewhere with Beck. Beck asks if Park knew he would come and if that's why he acted so boldly. He says he wants to give the young man some advice. Park might think he's special, but rare arrogance only leads to disaster. Those words catch Bayek off guard. Park's face is covered in blood, yet he says nothing for a moment. Then he says he'll remember that and thanks the elder for the warning. 1.5 years passes after that day, and he still remembers how lost he felt after everything went wrong. Even good intentions weren't welcomed by everyone. So once the Han River sovereign matter began moving, he made sure to prepare. This time he wouldn't act blindly, and he wouldn't be treated like a fool again. He refused to end up as the victim like before. Miss Yua had a garden, not an ordinary one, but a place where divine herbs were carefully grown. Still, that story might have been just a rumor, so he made a plan to get proof by drawing the attention of the woman who owned it. That's why he now stands ready before her. Yua asks if his name is Park, then points to the item and asks if he knows what it is. He answers that they are seeds of purgatory grass. She says mortals found something so valuable and were selling it on the black market. She investigated the seller so she could punish him hard. Feeling how serious this is, Park kneels and admits his crime. He says he had no choice because he was living in poverty, but Yua tells him to raise his head. She says it's settled now. He already paid for his sins. She only showed mercy to keep the punishment fair because killing her bird was no small matter. Even so, she's willing to be merciful once more. Then she asks why he doesn't work in her garden. She grows herbs and grasses herself, and if he can raise purgatory grass, then he should be skilled enough to grow normal water plants like the ones that purified the Han River Sovereign's poison. Park thanks her and says she thinks too highly of him. His plant work only comes from the technique he learned, but Yu points out that with that technique, ordinary plants should bear fruit in a day or two. Park answers that the purgatory grass never grew past a sprout no matter how much effort he gave it. So she asks if he's saying he simply lacks skill, and he admits that's true. Yu says he has more nerve than he looks. She can't believe he's bargaining with her. Still, she says she'll support him with divine herbs from her garden, provide the right tools, and even guide him herself so he can improve. She'll also assign another young man to help him. Park kneels again and thanks her for the mercy, but this was exactly what he had planned. After signaling to the other girl, Yua asks if she had been there the whole time. The girl quickly walks up to her master. Yua asks for her judgment, and the girl says Park seems suspicious. He was acting so polite that it felt like he was hiding something. She also heard he was the one who killed Yua's bird and took down the Han River Sovereign too. He didn't have much experience, so doing all that meant he was either a genius or a complete idiot. She asks if her master knew he was scheming from the start and accepted him anyway. That must be why she told her to watch him. But Yua tells her not to worry. She'll let him handle the 6th garden first. And even if he has bad intentions, he won't get even one seed from her garden. If he turns out useless, she can just make him fertilizer for the garden. The girl thinks they were supposed to work together because of the Peninsula Peach, but Yua is still a lady she can't fully like. Even so, she hopes Park ends up being useful. Meanwhile, Park walks down the street thinking the immortal hidden there had power over 300 while Yul was above 400. After reaching 10 stars in the Star Wind technique over the past year, he could roughly read other people's strength, though he still didn't trust the numbers completely. The Celestial King and that hot-headed man were both over 600. Ek was also above 400. Park himself was only around 45. He had learned all the Starwind techniques in the last year, but only in theory, so he still had a long way to go. When he arrives, he realizes he's finally at the place he wanted. There, he finds the sacred tree glowing. He tells that he brought an offering today, the centimani from the sovereign of the Han River. Since he was giving one to the tree, he figured he should get one back. Sometime later, Park sits in front of the tree and meditates, then suddenly opens his eyes. The smell of the peaches is so good it startles him. Just sitting there raised his attack power. The breathing peach had spent the whole past year shaping itself, and only in the last week had it bloomed and grown fruit, though they were still small. Now that they had matured a little, he thinks he can at least take a bite until a voice tells him not to rush. Park turns, surprised, and sees a small bear talking to him. He asks who it is, and the bear says the elder named him Gwanaki. Park wonders if this is the mountain god, Guanascan. Ever since the gates of heaven opened, the gods had started showing themselves again, and this one had it especially rough. Long ago, when the capital moved to Hangwang, the land officials believed Mount Guani's Khan's fire energy affected Hainawan, so they added water energy with the unicorn lion statue and dug the Blue Lagoon and did other work that kept stirring up the mountain's energy. That was why the bear was only half his normal size. Park says he's trained here for over a year and thought he would have met him sooner, but the bear says he saw no reason to bother someone quietly training. Park suspects the bear wants the peach, but the tree's twisted space keeps him from entering the barrier. So he tells the bear to wait. He just needs to eat something. The bear quickly stops him again, saying that would be reckless. All the tree's power is gathered in the fruit, and if Park takes it now, the tree's protection will disappear. Then what would he do if the people watching this place came for it? Park asks if the bear plans to steal the tree, and the bear snaps back. Does he look like a thief? Still, it wasn't only him. Sooner or later, others would find this place too. In fact, someone was already waiting at the end of the hill. Park looks up and senses a huge barrier packed with Yi energy. The bear points upward and reminds him he already warned him. If someone was hitting the barrier that hard, they were either dead set on dragging Park away or after the immortality peach. Park jokes that maybe it's like the peach from Journey to the West, the one the Monkey King ate, but the bear tells him to forget that. The real problem is a top Taoist using fire arts. Because of his training, Park could move through the tree's forms, but a human body couldn't properly handle an immortality peach. The bear could though, so Park should hand it over. Then he could recover his spirit power and protect both Park and the tree. Park apologizes again and eats the peach anyway. The bear is stunned, wondering who this kid even is. That was the immortality peach, the one tied to the Monkey King's rise to supreme strength. As the system announces the drug has been consumed, Park quickly sits down to meditate, and the bear can only wonder what will happen to him. The bear asks how he feels and whether his body changed. Park just says it tastes sweet and fresh, leaving the bear speechless. He calls Park an idiot, while Park thinks the little guy is way too worked up. Still, no breathing method could control the heat moving through his body. It wasn't as painful as before. This warmth was much softer. The bear explains that even a low-grade fruit takes 3,000 years to grow, so one made in a year had to be very poor quality. Park admits he's struggling and asks for help, but the bear says he couldn't help even if he wanted to. He doesn't have enough power. Park suddenly flicks a seed at the bear's forehead, which instantly annoys him. Then the bear realizes what hit him and asks if that was a purgatory seed. Was Park really giving him something that valuable? Park calmly hands over several more, saying that's all he has for now. Then he asks if that will be enough for the bear to recover, and the bear says yes easily. Park asks what he should do next, and the bear says from here on, he can start selling caves. Park is completely thrown off by that answer. The bear explains that 3 purgatory grass sprouts still aren't enough to restore all his power, so Park asks what else he can do. The bear asks if he's hiding anything else, and Park says he can check. He opens the system and says it has that function. The bear notes it's a map of the area, while Park realizes he'll have to deal with the person coming closer. The bear asks if he's really planning to fight, and Park says yes. If he does nothing, they'll take his tree. The bear knows Park should lose with his current strength, which makes his calm attitude even stranger. Then Park runs straight toward the incoming figure. The man thinks he's finally found him, and soon Park is standing right in front of him. Sensing his energy, the man asks if Park is the Celestial King's disciple sent to bring him back. Park immediately says yes and adds that he was even given an item, the 9-tailed fox fan. The bear blurts out that the 9-tailed fox fan had only appeared once in 300 years. He can't believe a treasure that rare was made from a foxtail. Since it was a sacred treasure, the tail stayed whole, and the phantom energy inside had to be immense. The man confirms the fan really does come from the 9-tailed fox. Park then asks if he would really set off an explosion in a place full of people, even with the Celestial King's fan. The man asks if Park can't feel the energy around them. No matter what skill he used or how loud he screamed, no one would get out. The bear cuts in, explaining that the strange power around the man came from the treasure, which held the strength of 4 celestial beasts. The man gets annoyed and asks why the bear keeps interrupting. Park hadn't known any of that, and the man grows even angrier, shouting that even this little creature keeps meddling in his business. Instead of taking the fish's life, he says he'll take Park's. Watching him, Park realizes the sacred item had boosted the man's power to nearly 105 times his base strength. It felt like some pay-to-win fantasy game item. So when the hit came, Park spread his energy across the mountain, lowering the enemy's edge. He could tell the man wasn't truly gathering power for himself. Seeing through it, Park activates wind distribution. He figures the man is drawing back the energy he scattered. Then the attack comes in seconds, and Park breaks it apart with ease. The bear is stunned, wondering if martial arts like that should even be possible. Park reminds the man of what he said earlier. If you raise a weapon at someone, you'd better be ready for the return strike. Shocked, the man demands how some nobody without proper teaching dares stand against him. Then something strange happens. Blue light wraps around the boy, and he suddenly drops. He hits the ground unconscious. Park moves over to check on him and says that by using the fan recklessly to force out more power than he could handle, the boy had his soul pulled into it instead. Park isn't fully convinced, but the bear says that if the right person had used it, the whole mountain would have exploded. That makes Park wonder just how powerful a sacred item really is and decide he needs that fan. Suddenly, another blast shakes the barrier. It seems the man from before is attacking it. The elder grabs his disciple and calls this an unbelievable blunder. He can't believe a disciple of the Celestial King turned into a fool in his own territory, and now the child won't escape the Celestial King's wrath again. Even being the commander of the Immortal Society or a master of red martial arts means nothing next to the 8 sacred monks. Park says he only acted in self-defense. To him, that also counts for the man attacking him now, and he gets ready to strike back. Irritated, the elder says he should have burned Park a year ago. He still can't understand why the Celestial King wants someone this dangerous walking around, but now he'll burn Park down until nothing is left but bones. Still, Park stayed calm and showed no reaction. A second later, he took off running with the old man chasing right behind him. Spells kept flying at him. Cornered, Park knew he was in a bad spot. This fight just wasn't going in his favor. Out of every element, fire suited him the least. The bear told him to use the 9-tailed fox fan. Just pour energy into it and swing. It should work with any element. But before anything else, the elder blasted the bear. Even so, Park kept thinking over the bear's idea, worried the fan might swallow his soul like it did to the others. Still, he had no better choice, so he went for it. He started using the fan's power. The elder snapped, demanding to know how Park dared touch the 9-tailed fox fan. Then every attack suddenly turned back on the elder. Park could only stare in shock, so this was a sacred item's power. Then he wondered where the old man had gone. At that exact moment, something hit him from behind and tore into him. Park guessed one of his organs had been damaged. The elder rose through the flames and called him pathetic. First, Park had made the Celestial King's disciple look like a fool, and now he was using the 9-tailed fox fan too. Park couldn't believe the man was still alive. He couldn't understand how these so-called immortals fought so dirty. The elder fired off more spells and declared this was the end. They slammed into Park and nearly killed him. The elder said he wouldn't fall for those cheap tricks again, and this time he dragged Park to the Celestial King. Barely holding on, Park wondered if this was where he died. He figured he might have won if his body had been fully recovered. Then he noticed something strange. The pain was suddenly gone. A peach floated up, and the system announced the drug analysis was finished. Long ago, the Monkey King wanted freedom from outside control, so he gained a skin no sacred treasure from the celestial realm could easily harm. He survived 49 days on the 8-fold celestial path and even endured Buddha's 5 fingers. That skin lasted about 500 years, so Dong searched for a body that could not die. In the end, he got cells even the cruel death arts of the underworld's envoys couldn't damage. Even the king of the underworld eventually gave up trying to kill him. The system then said the drug had been consumed. Its source was the peach, and its role was to create custom tools matched to an element. That was how Park got the power he wanted. The new organ handled many body functions, including clearing out poison. His new liver sent cold water like energy through his whole body. When Park opened his eyes, he was completely different. The elder noticed the change and wondered how Park had gained water energy. Then he realized his mistake. Park was an irregular. Park didn't know how any of this happened. For now, he was just happy the heat was gone. He grabbed the 9-tailed fox fan again and attacked the elder once more. The man, still in total disbelief, got hit head-on. That ended the fight. Right after winning, Park collapsed, and the bear desperately yelled for him to wake up. As he slowly came to, the bear asked if he was back in his right mind. Then he added that he'd rather not talk about what just happened and asked whether Park should get out of this water. Still dazed, Park looked around and saw the whole place had flooded. He had no idea what was going on. While checking the elder's body, Park said he'd heard there was a flag that controlled the barrier and started looking for it. Then he found a red talisman-like item. The bear said it was actually a treasure pouch. Basically, it was a magic bag that could hold items big or small, but the bear warned this wasn't the time to mess around. Others were probably already on their way. When Park hoisted the man onto his back, the bear asked where he thought he was going. Then Park dropped the body back down, making the bear ask what he was even thinking. If they stayed any longer, someone might find the tree. As Park began casting a spell, he calmly told the bear to relax. He was setting up something to fool whoever came after them. The bear was shocked by what Park was doing. He thought Park was feeding the upper Tawa's body into the tree to make a new fruit bloom. Park said they had made it just in time. With more people getting closer, he said they finished at the last second. The bear explained the peach tree had bloomed and opened its barrier, which was why no one had found them yet. Still, the bear complained that if the Tiwa hadn't been fire element, the tree couldn't have grown another fruit. Using that chance, Park asked if the fruit had any special healing effect, but the bear said he didn't know. It was such a rare treasure that only a few knew what it really did. Since Park hadn't changed much, the bear guessed the fruit might not have been fully ripe yet. Park thought that if his liver really could boost his power, then his water energy might keep growing. That gave him a lot to think about, especially what a long-cultivated fruit might do. The bear then looked like he wanted to ask something, finally asking if Park could show him the outside world. Park asked whether a mountain deity could really leave, and the bear said he only needed to share his alter ego. He did need power for that though, and Park figured the bear was about to stick to him like glue. The bear admitted he had no other way to tag along. Now that they'd met, he said he wanted to see the world and all its good things through Park. After thinking it over, Park agreed, but only if the bear gave him something first. The bear immediately handed over a weapon. As Park looked it over, the bear explained that for ages, all across the Korean peninsula and East Asia, there had been a race called goblins. They were smart, naturally skilled, and had spiritual bodies. On top of that, they had special weapons that sharpened their power, the goblin helmet and club. Looking at the weapon, Park asked if he could even use it since he remembered reading that only the real owner could. The bear said that was true, but it was also a priceless treasure. A goblin would trade almost anything for it. The helmet and club couldn't be made again. If one was lost, the owner lost half their strength. Park pointed out that if the bear still had it, then he probably didn't know who the original owner even was. From the way the bear described it, the deal sounded fine. So Park took the club and said they were traveling together now, which made the bear happy. After that, Park said they should focus on working for the Lady of the Garden. First, though, he'd gather the special items from the unconscious people nearby. Elsewhere, with the Hibuji 22 summit set for the 31st, the government planned private talks with leaders of major nations. Someone said the summit was supposedly about something called the Tower of Marbling. Park corrected him. It was Babel. The Tower of Babel was an ancient structure humans built to reach heaven. It wasn't exactly the same as the old myth, but it existed long before heaven's gates were shut. Now, in the current dynasty of the Immortals, they planned to rebuild it based on Babylon's design. But if that happened, languages across the world could be thrown into chaos. That might help in some ways, but the damage would be huge too, especially for industries built on translation. Park brushed it off as another world-scale issue that had nothing to do with him. Then suddenly, an accident happened. Park jumped up at once and asked what just happened, but what he saw caught him off guard. The girl from earlier was standing by the car, telling him to get out. She introduced herself as Jack Xiang and said she'd been told to help him for now. But if he dragged her into anything stupid, he'd regret it. Park quickly promised not to. A little later, the bear, now stuck to his phone case, muttered the girl's name again and whispered that Park was in for trouble. Park asked if he knew her. The bear said only a little, then asked if he wanted to hear her weakness. According to him, she had a huge soft spot for handsome men, which left Park totally lost. Long ago on Jeju Island, the deity's sun moon was famous for being unbelievably handsome. Jack Shangbai, though, had just been an ordinary girl. She happened to see him while he was bathing, and that shock awakened her spiritual body even though heaven's gates were closed. Back in the present, Park found that story impossible to believe. The bear said huge shocks to the mind and body can trigger awakenings. People like that are chosen and raised by deities living in the human world. Since Jack Xiangbei had the same celestial body type as the Mun family, the other man accepted her offer. And from then on, she chased after that young man. But Mun clearly didn't recognize her since she was an immortal with no patron. Furious, she demanded to know why she didn't deserve to be acknowledged and swore she'd give Moon no choice but to notice her. In less than 100 years, Jack Xiang conquered Jeju Island. People started calling her the chosen flower, the one who would reach heaven and sweep across the world. After founding her own dynasty, she formally asked Moon to marry her, but his father feared her power and came up with a plan to exile her. While she was getting ready for the wedding and dreaming of a happy future, she was betrayed. On her wedding day, a trap was set for her. The people who came weren't there to celebrate. They were assassins sent to kill her. Furious, she slaughtered everyone involved. They even used the deadly Sura flower of extinction, but still couldn't get away. That clash was later called the Great Battle that nearly sank the island, but in the end, she was the one who truly lost. The deepest wound came from her own lover's betrayal. Later, some regents tried to use her power for themselves. They kept sending handsome young men because of the rumor she liked them, but every one of them ended up dead. The bear asked Park if that didn't make him feel safer since she had no reason to hate him. He wasn't exactly handsome. That set Park off, and he threatened to throw the bear back on the mountain. A little later, the girl asked what he was doing. They had reached their destination, and as they went up the stairs, Park apologized for what happened earlier. The warden told him the castle had 6 gardens, numbered 1 through 6. Out of all of them, the only one Park could use was the 6th garden. He figured that meant he got the worst place, so he never expected to be handed valuable medicinal herbs right away. Even so, what he found still shocked him. There were only 2 suns there, and the whole place looked miserable. The warden explained that every gate led to a different realm with its own space and time. From now on, Park was the lord of this place and in charge of raising crops. When Park asked who ruled it before, she shot back that there hadn't been anyone. The garden had stayed shut since the last lord died 100 years ago. Park figured that as the world changed and more mortals appeared, herbs had become more valuable because demand kept rising. She added that living here didn't mean he'd be poor. Once harvest season came, he could make a lot, especially since there were no other gardeners. Soon after, she said goodbye and left. Right then, Park's phone started ringing, and he dropped it. The fall flipped the screen and exposed his wallpaper. At once, the bear's earlier words came rushing back to him. Park quickly blurted out that he respected the girl. Sometime later, he woke up and found the bear chewing on something, saying he was finally up. According to the bear, he'd been knocked out for almost 2 hours. Park asked what happened, and the bear said it was one clean hit. He'd never seen someone pull that off without even using a technique. The bear explained that even if the 6th garden ranked last, it still grew carefully chosen seeds, so Park should make the most of it. Park remembered the girl saying she'd keep watching until the next harvest. If he showed real skill, maybe he could ask to grow rarer plants later, maybe the peaches he'd eaten before or something even better. He decided to use the 6th garden to grow stronger. That meant he wouldn't let anyone take it from him or hurt his family in this wild world of mortals. But first, he had to deal with the wasteland in front of him. After checking the area, he saw the whole place was wrecked. Then he reached into his backpack and found all his things burned up. Still, he already knew why. He'd pushed them too hard in the last fight. He thanked his sword for saving his life so many times. The bear stared at him, shocked by how honestly he was praying. It had only been a plant, yet it had burned bright without regret. Then the sword changed into a huge tree. Its roots spread out and covered the whole area. The bear was stunned and couldn't understand how it was happening. He thought the burned spirit would need at least a month to recover, but it came back almost at once. At the same time, Park ordered the other trees to rise, and with his power, he called out wooden monsters. He told them to take care of the farming work. Then they began studying the trees. The bear couldn't believe it. Park had summoned the tree's living spirits, something even top ranks struggled to do, but Park said he needed a break because he'd used too much energy. After going inside, he was surprised by how big the house was. He sat down to meditate and recover with his breathing method. Soon, he was fully focused, then suddenly stood up. He was sure a plant had reacted to his breathing. Guessing it was under the floor, he decided to use his remaining seeds to dig it out. He started tearing into the ground, leaving the bear staring and asking what he was doing. Then something showed up in the rubble. An explosion went off and Park, startled, looked closely at what had been buried there. He asked about the red circle. The bear said it was a blood barrier, and whoever made it must have carried a huge twisted grudge. Park realized the pulse he'd felt was coming from underneath it. He decided to break the circle. So he started striking the barrier, and to his surprise, he opened a hidden chamber underground. It belonged to Park, the former lord of the 6th garden, known by a different name. His record was left for the next lord to read. In it, he planned to reveal the castle's crimes. One day, after drinking with a friend, he wandered into a shrine and got possessed because the guardian deity there had been taken over by a ghost. He couldn't do anything then, but a kind scholar passing by helped him. The scholar drove the ghost out and said Park would recover soon. But if a ghost had attached itself to him, that meant his spiritual physique was awakening. In that state, staying in the human world meant immortals would hunt him or wandering spirits would torment him. Still, the scholar said there was no need to fear because he knew an immortal who could guide him. Following that advice, Park entered the lady of the castle's pavilion. She told him that if he trained his mortal sense and kept practicing, he might transcend. But since he had been born an immortal, doing that would be like trying to grab a star from the night sky. He made no progress and took whatever work he could while his debt kept piling up. Eventually, he thought he had no way out. But later, when he was almost 30, he met a child from the human world whose spiritual physique had also awakened. What brought that child there shocked him because it was the same thing that had happened to him. He learned he really had been possessed by a ghost, not because he entered a guardian shrine, but because that scholar had put ghosts on him on purpose to awaken his spiritual physique. He had only been a pawn in the scholar's game. After learning that, he knew he couldn't spend his whole life as a servant, so he bowed to anyone who had mastered earth arts and begged them to teach him. But even after collecting all that knowledge, his powerless mortal body kept weakening with age. In time, people gave him a nickname, Foxtail Grass. Because he was always bowing from hard work, they said he looked like the grass growing everywhere, and the name stuck. At that point, he truly started thinking about the end of his life because he felt completely helpless. Then a miracle came. The lady rewarded his sacrifice and effort. That was how he became the Lord of the Sixth Garden. There was no way he wouldn't be moved by that. He swore never to forget the lady's kindness and to carry out his duty as Lord of the Sixth Garden until the day he died. From then on, he gave himself fully to the earth dragon art of the Sixth Garden. Because of that, his strength kept growing, and he eventually reached the edge of becoming an immortal mystic. But even with all that progress, his body became weaker and weaker. Only then did he understand the truth of the earth dragon art. It worked well, but the herbs of the Sixth Garden were draining its power through his body. Without knowing it, he had turned into living fertilizer. He realized he didn't have much life left. Reading that, Park was stunned. He thought stuff like that only happened on TV, but immortals really could do it. He said he had suspected as much, but his own life had nothing in common with what was written there. The bear replied that this was normal. Immortals used people like that to keep their realm running. Park couldn't help wondering if he might end up the same way. The record went on to say that anyone strong enough to break the blood barrier he made had to be talented enough to burn down the cursed pavilion. For the sake of the juniors trapped like him, that person should run with the stolen treasure and protect it even at the cost of their life. Park wondered if the items there belonged to the people mentioned in the record. As he searched through them, he found mandrake seeds grown by people across the seas. Then he picked up another item and asked what it was. The book said nothing, and the bear told him it looked like a container used for drawing lots at temples. Park was startled when he realized the pulsing sound hadn't come from the seed at all, but from that object. He wondered if he should try using it to grow something. Then it suddenly exploded. The object seemed to reject growing together with him. Picking it up again, he asked what it really was. It felt familiar to him, and he wondered if it was a blade shaft. The bear then told him it was a sword. At the same time, the lady seemed to be studying something. She said that man really had come there. Then another girl appeared. She admitted this was rude, but said they needed to move first because it was urgent. She'd heard Yunhwa kept a treasure in the main palace and wanted it returned. The seven-branched sword was a very strange treasure, and it was precious even in the land where it was forged. That place had once been a nation that couldn't fully stand on its own because among the three kingdoms, only Box lacked the power needed to found a proper state. Silla was founded first by a man with an unusual body, while Goguryeo was built by a saint who called back the former lady with the blessings of the peninsula's ancestral spirits. But King Unju raised that man through human effort alone with no special power or past life. He later awakened an ordinary physique, gained the gold element, learned to control his own energy, and became a martial master. Even as a human, King Unju was a rare genius. That man reached his height thanks to King Unju, but later rulers lacked the same skill, so Baksh slowly fell. In time, almost all traces of it vanished, except one thing. It was tied to the Saint Prince, a genius compared to King Unju, who spread Baksh's influence across the continent and islands. The seven-branched sword was his finest creation, a treasure counted among the greatest sacred artifacts. Back in the present, the woman asked if they had ever obtained the blade before, and the girl said that was all they knew. Old records say that when the king tried to send the sword to the celestial king, the messenger carrying it died of natural causes. The ship was recovered safely, but the sword never reached its destination. Hearing that, the lady asked if the girl meant the 7-branch sword had some kind of axis. She found it strange since it sounded like the girl had figured out the axis long ago. So why ask now? The girl answered that she hadn't come for pointless questions. Speaking for the sanctuary, she came to offer a 6-month celestial lease. The lady of the garden understood and asked for the terms. The other woman said they would use the blade of the 7-branch sword in the middle of that battle. If they lost, they wanted the right to take one item from the lady's estate. And if the sword's axis was there, they would take only that and nothing more. Not long after, the lady of the garden agreed, but she wanted to add one more condition. 6 months passed. By then, a group was talking about broadcasting the next celestial fight live. The lady herself had said she would reveal it, and one man questioned why they needed to air it. Sure, it would be fun to watch, but they were almost at the 6th garden. He warned them not to stir trouble with its lord while they were getting close. A little later, the group reached the place. What they found there stunned them because the area had once been barren. At the same time, Park was eating and reading when he noticed the guests arrive. The young man looked shocked by Park's casual behavior. He told Park to at least show some respect. Park quickly got up, greeted them, and introduced himself as Park, the lord of the 6th garden. The other boy gave his name as Lee and said he had come to report on the garden's progress. Checking a system window on his phone, Park asked why his juniors kept calling him senior. When everyone realized the boy was a celestial immortal, they were stunned. Park then asked if a celestial fight was about to happen. They said yes. Even the supreme immortal would join along with 2 ranked players from the Japanese side. Park said he hadn't heard about it since he rarely went outside, then asked if Lee was taking part. Lee said that was how things had turned out. Lee had awakened his spiritual physique during the Korean War after losing his family in a bombing. Later, he joined the ladies' pavilion. Even if his rank could drop, he still had talent and only grew brighter after meeting a true master. Park thought most mortals weren't trustworthy, but this boy felt different. He had already apologized for his servant's behavior. Park said he couldn't believe Lee would be in the celestial fight and guessed he must be the strongest immortal there. Lee answered that he was still lacking, but the lady had given him a chance to join that great event. He added that some contestants were far stronger, like Go, who was nearly a pure immortal and said to be tied to the bloodline of the lady's son. Even so, Lee felt lucky to face someone like that in a celestial fight. Meanwhile, Park kept studying the boy from before. Elsewhere, the ladies' group talked among themselves, saying the sanctuary had accepted their proposal. Mortals were supporting them heavily because they had killed several creatures, and if they pushed the angle of national pride, they'd get even more donations and praise than the girl who had slain one before. Just then, another woman stepped in and cut off the discussion. She reported that the lord of the 6th garden had come to see her. The lady told her to keep him waiting. They were in the middle of a family meeting, but the woman said Park had said something that deeply angered her. Another boy jumped up in rage, asking if that newcomer was really challenging him. The lady, though, said dealing with Park might not be a bad idea. Rumors claimed he stayed in the celestial rank on purpose because he was afraid to compete. If the boy hated hearing that, then he should accept the challenge and prove himself. Watching this, the lady of the garden agreed the woman had a point. She asked him if he could defeat Park. The young man still looked unsure. Later, the two were already facing off with the lady and several others watching. The boy fixed Park with a hard glare and warned him not to blame anyone if he ended up burning in pain. Park was surprised by the killing intent in his eyes. Then the judge gave the signal to start. The boy opened with a barrage of spells, and Park answered with his own magic. His opponent sneered, asking if Park really thought a flimsy shield that couldn't even hold its petals together could stop him. He swore he'd never let Park enjoy using that ability again. Then he summoned a meteor-like spell. With a grim look, he declared Park was finished. Park didn't flinch and prepared his own spell. He shot back that the opposite would happen, that he would kill the boy instead. Their attacks crashed together in an instant, but Park's magic blocked the strike with ease, and the shield even began absorbing the other boy's power. A huge explosion burst out across the area. Suddenly, a man stepped between them and apologized for interrupting. He stood in front of Park and said he couldn't let a child die since the winter was already clear. The boy protested, insisting he could still fight and that no one should interfere, but the man calmly said the victory already belonged to Park and that his talent would never shame the pavilion. The lady watched in silence, then accepted the result. The man's opinion carried weight, and Park's talent was clearly worth a lot. Soon after, she called Park over. Meanwhile, the defeated boy stared at the man, wondering who he was. Later, the lady asked Park what kind of training he had done during the last 6 months. Park said the earth element matched him well. And with martial arts growing fast, his progress had sped up too. He knew she had brought him here to develop something and said she could just command him directly if that was what she wanted. He promised she could trust him because he had no desire to betray her. The lady said those were bold words and asked if he had planned this from the start. For now, she told him to stay in the competition while she considered 2 places for him. As Park was leaving, he asked one last thing, whether he could go out for a while. Later, he was walking beside the man from earlier. Park thought that when the lady said he'd have a companion, he hadn't expected this man. Then he asked for his name. The man said he was Dan Diok, though Park could call him Rim. Park thought that, unlike his first appearance, the man was actually pretty easygoing. Glancing over, Park asked if he wanted to grab a drink. Before long, the two were walking along and enjoying themselves. The man said that even if he understood these things, life in the human world was nothing like the immortal realm. Park smiled, glad that Ryan seemed to be enjoying himself. Park mentioned hearing that immortals sometimes visited the human world and asked if Ryan had done that. Ryan said yes. After dying in the human world, he became an immortal with the lady's help, but he was crushed to learn he would live in the immortal world instead of returning to the human one. Park figured the man must have left behind many regrets. Ryan went on to say that he once told the human world his name because he wanted people to remember him even after death. Now though, he saw it as a childish dream that never came true. In the immortal realm, he kept thinking about what he had lost and all he failed to do. But in the end, it was only part of his past. Calling it a long speech, Ryan thanked Park for listening and said Park had let him enjoy the human world again. Then they came across a group holding a protest, demanding that the Dragon King stop this year's human sacrifices. Ryan looked at it and asked if Park understood what he was seeing. He couldn't believe the ruler of a country would offer up his own people. Angry, Ryan said they should go straight to the country's leader, but Park told him to wait. A black circle appeared overhead, and at first it looked like an eclipse. But then a dangerous energy spread through the area. An explosion followed, and people ran in panic while a man in the dark sneered that these beings had forgotten their place. Park rushed him in anger and struck with the tool he got earlier, seeming to take him down. Then he heard people begging for help behind him. Right then, something slammed into Park, and the attacker said he never expected to find him here. He said Park had wandered into the wrong world, and that was why he was going to kill him. Feeling that energy, Park guessed the man was tied to Nikusha or someone like her. He knew that disgusting aura. It was the same one the woman had felt since the statue was destroyed, and this guy clearly came to kill. Park asked if he was connected to the man he had just beaten. Then he added that the guy could talk all he wanted. He would still answer for everything he had done. The man demanded to know what crimes Park meant, but Park restarted his spell, covering the whole area, and said the one who really had to pay was him. At once, several wooden figures appeared and moved in, taking down the man's followers. A woman yelled at them to stop wasting time and release the phantom so they could rip the human apart. A moment later, those phantoms, ghosts, were sent straight at Park. Park thought he never expected to use it, but he was glad he had bought that short pipe at the market. He took the drug right away, boosting his strength, stamina, and focus. Then Park grabbed a root-like weapon and said he wouldn't miss any of them, cutting them down one after another. The woman mocked him, saying it didn't matter how many ghost trees fought back. It was like hitting a rock with a toothpick. She barked at her men to release even more phantoms and trap him for good. But seconds later, blood spilled from her mouth, and all her subordinates dropped to the ground too. Twisting in pain, they cried for help. Park stared in surprise and asked if she really thought he'd be dumb enough to use a sword on her. Looking at the smoke, the woman started to realize what it was. Park explained that the drug cleansed his body, but for everyone else, the smoke was deadly poison. He added that the technique was terrifying. With her last breath, the woman called out for her father, then an explosion cut her off. A man appeared and asked if she had just said, "Father," while another grabbed the first and asked if that was who she meant. Seeing the young man, Park realized he was the celestial god, Mikasa. A moment later, the man slammed the other one to the ground, and the victim shouted, asking who they were and whether they had any idea who he was. Park's companion answered that it didn't matter. What mattered was the unforgivable sin he had committed against the people. The young man only laughed and said he had been wondering what nonsense they were saying. He told them to remember it on their way to hell and said that out of curiosity alone, he wouldn't let a single mortal live. Park realized the man wasn't just absorbing the corpses. He was taking their power too. He couldn't understand why innocent people were being used like this. The art was unbelievably strong, and Park had no idea how to stop it. He wondered if he should use the nine-tailed fox fan. He wasn't sure it would work, but he had no better option. The other man said this was an ancient art, and he couldn't believe blood reincarnation had appeared in the human world. Then he asked if Park could lend him his sword. Even in the middle of all that, the man stayed completely focused. Park handed over the blade, and with one slash, he split the sphere in two. He said he had no right to judge the man's crimes against innocent people just because he belonged to the immortal realm. But killing other immortals and using sacrifices to gain power was unforgivable, so someone from the immortal realm had to take responsibility and punish him. He unleashed a flurry of strikes on the young man, and within seconds, the man was dead. Soon after, mortal society moved fast. The terrorists were arrested, and the suspects turned out to be from an organization called Rio Ablum. Meanwhile, that lady watched the news as a man on TV gave his take, saying mortal society had done nothing except record what happened. He told viewers to watch the footage because those two were their former heroes, and Park and his companions' faces appeared on screen. The host said one of them looked very familiar and asked if people remembered him, the hero from a year and a half ago, the one who had cut off the giant bird's head. Later, that man apologized to his lady, saying he wasn't worthy of staying in the mortal realm and would accept whatever punishment came. She then asked Park if after everything he had done, he still dared to look her in the eye. Park bowed at once, apologizing for the trouble. He noticed she didn't even seem angry. Then the lady told the man to lift his head. She said she wouldn't call his actions wrong, but she was scolding him for being careless. After that, she told Park to get ready for discipline and dismissed them soon after, both of them. Later, Park returned to his garden and felt like he'd been gone for days. Glad to see it again, he picked up some notes and thought about the item hidden inside that statue. He hadn't expected it to hold any special power. Then the bear popped onto his head and asked if that was Yi's handwriting. Park asked whether that family had done something to him, and the spirit angrily said that family was the reason he was stuck in this form. Park kept studying the scroll, which looked ordinary at first glance. Still, he was sure the writer was King Sejong. The message said he knew he didn't have long to live, but he wasn't afraid of death. What scared him most was watching his son die before him, along with worrying about the people he would leave behind. It said Hang was getting thinner every day because of a deity's curse, and he feared that after he and his friend died, someone backed by immortals would seize the throne. If that happened, the land could drown in innocent blood and tears again, just as many had died before because of the deities. He wanted to end the time when immortals treated the human world like a toy. Even people without awakened spiritual bodies would need power to face immortals. There was talk of runes from a distant war in the northwest, and if all the letters were joined, their true power would appear like verses carrying power inside the words. So if someone could form a full text with them, they might achieve something amazing. Park thought he might have been trying to build a language system like the Draco Bone script. The bear said that Child's genius was famous even in the immortal realm, and if he had lived one more year, he would have finished it. But Park quickly said he thought the man actually had succeeded. The writing went on to say that anyone good at reading and writing only needed to learn how to activate it. Then anyone could use the power in those letters. His final wish was that the 28 characters would never vanish from the world so people could reach their goals more easily. Reading that, Park smiled and praised the dead king, saying the future he dreamed of had come true. Then Park used his power, and the wooden blocks started floating. He was amazed by the attack power, all created through words and sounds made to guide the people. As the text said, if you could picture the word in your mind, reciting it was enough. So Park spoke the word burn, and the objects burst into flame. Park Haniel stared in shock at what he was seeing, then got excited and kept setting more things on fire. The little bear showed up again and asked who was making all that noise. Then he jumped, shocked, and asked why Park was playing with fire in broad daylight. Landing on his head, he asked how someone who couldn't even make fire without him had suddenly learned to do it, and warned him to be careful before the flames spread. Park Han-yeol started thinking that when he said the word louder, the fire seemed to grow stronger, or maybe speaking too forcefully made it consume more. He went quiet to think it through and decided that if he made a longer, more meaningful phrase, he could create something stronger and more useful. Park Han-yeol took a deep breath and shouted, calling on the sky to weep and cry, repeating the word sky over and over, but nothing happened. He admitted saying that out loud was pretty embarrassing, then realized he wasn't alone. Sun Bainum was smiling after seeing the whole thing. Red-faced, Park asked how long she had been standing there watching, and she started teasing him about his training. Then she said it was fine and that she respected the effort, smiling at him again, which only made him more embarrassed. After that, Park Han-yeol asked why she came, and she said she heard he was entering the celestial battle. She also asked if he had beaten Chal and said he was getting stronger fast. Then she explained that she'd gone out to prepare for the battle and had found something for him. She added that she was supposed to be looking after him, but lately that hadn't seemed necessary anymore. Then Sun Bainum tossed something to Park Han-yeol. He asked what it was, and she said it was a scripture sent to him for entering the celestial battle. When he asked who made it, Sun Bainum said it came from a sage, his father, which left him stunned. Right away, he got annoyed and demanded to know where she found this man calling himself his father. She answered that she met him in a place called Shengfu. Long ago, Huaneng came down from heaven and gave a special root to a bear and a tiger who wanted to become human. The tiger ran away, but the bear endured it, became the human Un Myo, and later had Dangon Wang Yun with Huang Nong. That's the story most people know. What people forgot is that Un Myo was never Huang's true wife. Huang and his family raised the sacred tree of life in Shenzhenfu, a place where heaven and earth were linked. Sun Bainum explains that Park Han-yeol's father married Weining's youngest princess and lived there. She says that after finishing her business in Shengfu and getting ready to leave, a man came to her, warning that his son owed a debt to the palace and would soon be in danger, so he wrote down something important and left it at that. Park Han-yeol had always believed his father abandoned the family and ran off. He wasted their money on himself, and the debt fell on Han-yeol's mother and grandmother. His father took none of the blame, and in the end, his grandmother died for nothing. Now Han-yeol grimly thinks his father built a new family and threw the old one away. Sun Bainum tells him to open the box, saying it's truly valuable. When he does, he finds a sealed bamboo fan scripture. It was made to seal and control demonic beasts and evil spirits. The 24-blade fan is high grade, and anything over 48 is top class. But the one he got has 72 blades, leaving him confused about why his father would give him something this rare. Sun Bainum adds that it's especially useful for absorbing evil spirits if he wants to use it. Park Han-yeol says he'll treasure it, since he'd never get another item this precious. Sun Bainum smiles, knowing his road ahead won't be easy. 8 hours before the competition, the protagonist senses a presence and says someone is there, then DX shows up. Surprised, Park Han-yeol asks why he came, and DX says he needs a favor. He wants help making the Flute of Peace. People say it first appeared during Unified Silla, but it was actually designed long before that. Back in King Guangado's era, there was a man so perfect that even the immortals couldn't control him. Because of that, the immortals lost their power, and the Water Dragon King caused a huge disaster that killed many people. To fight those disasters, the three kingdoms joined forces for a time. Their masters created the Flute of Peace, a heavenly item so powerful that it came with 2 rules. It could never leave the Korean peninsula, and it could never be used to harm the people there. Deke says it was used once in Silla against the Water Dragon King, then vanished. That's why he came to the protagonist. He believes the boy may know what's needed to make another one. Soon, the garden guards will be fewer because of the competition, so he plans to take black jade bamboo from the second garden. For a new Flute of Peace, they need that black bamboo no matter what. But Leiyu may grow suspicious, and that could start another clash with the Dragon Palace. Hearing that, Park Han-yeol figures Deke plans to take all the blame himself, and he probably wants to do this because of the protests they saw in Gwangwamun. He also realizes Deke isn't like the other immortals, so he agrees to help. He says Deke is thinking about the people, and someone like that deserves support. Refusing to help would be wrong. Deke smiles, happy that the boy said yes, then he tells him it's time to go. When they arrive, Park Han-yeol finds a floating island. Deke explains it's an artificial space made by the pavilion, and if they change the structure's formula, they can get in. But it won't be simple. Deke throws a tiny wooden horse, and it turns into a black horse. He tells the boy to grab his hand. As they fly through the sky, Deke says he won't let anything touch him, which confuses Park Han-yeol. But when he looks back, he sees flying sea monsters chasing them. Dayak drops him onto the island and says he'll hold them off, then he rides away. Park Han-yeol quickly realizes he has his own problems to deal with there. He takes the mandrake drug and remembers that with the proper sounds for instructing the people, longer, more meaningful words work better. He shouts fast and starts moving quicker. Soon, he feels strange energy coming from 2 spots and hopes one of them is the Black Jade Lake. Then a creature attacks him, something that feels even stronger than a celestial immortal. If it has a wood attribute, he knows he'll be in trouble. Still, he says he already took the drug, so getting past him won't be easy. The creature charges and the protagonist shouts, "Appear." A brown bear shows up. The lizards try to run, but the bear chases after them. Tells the boy to keep waving the fan. The protagonist realizes there's a reason it's called the God of Fire Mountain. Among the great mountains, spirits with evil in their names are rare, and only one of them can naturally control fire. Legend says people feared that mountain fire would spread through Seoul, so they made a lake around it to hold the fire energy down. The creatures keep fleeing, and the bear tells the boy to back him up. Park and all thinks it's odd. They're running straight toward that energy. If the island is thriving because of the Jade Lake, then that turtle-shaped structure they're heading toward must matter. He wonders if it's the Black Jade Lake, but it only looks like stone. Then the little bear asks him to put it down there. The boy says he's never seen anything like it and asks if the bear will regret this, but the bear says it just wants to know. So he waves the fan, and the bear becomes huge again. As it tears through the lizards, it says they're pathetically weak. Then something inside the cave watches the bear and traps it in a bubble of water. The bear immediately calls for help. The protagonist breaks the bubble with his power. Park Hanul says this must be the creature acting as fertilizer for the island, and the little bear is shocked that something really was hidden inside. The protagonist wonders if it's a yum hate. If a baby is already this big, then an adult would be terrifying. He's also stunned that it isn't a lake at all, but a divine beast being used to feed someone's pride and the Leaf family. The bear says that even as a baby, it's about 2,000 years old, and the way it uses that technique so wildly shows it never learned the basics. Holding the fan, Park Hyun-yul says this is actually good for the bear. The little animal, now nervous, asks what he means. The boy waves the fan and promises to buy it a jar of honey later to make up for this. Then he seals both creatures inside the fan. Inside it, the monster starts fighting the brown bear. Park Hanul is glad they both fit. He snaps the fan shut and says it's time to go. As they escape, the boy thanks Deke for helping him get out, but he notices Deke seems oddly short of breath. A second later, he sees that Deke is bleeding. Deke brushes it off, saying he only needs some rest. Even so, Park Hanul worries, especially with the fight only hours away. Then Deke hands him something, calling it payment for helping with such a hard task. He says it was made by twin dragons from the Garden of Flowers, and he wishes he could offer more from his own collection. But this was all he could secure. The boy stays quiet, and Deke tells him not to look so serious. He deserves far more than that. Park Hanul thinks the job still isn't over since the flute of peace still has to be made, and things may reach a point where they can't escape Boo's grasp. Then he helps Deke walk and says they should get moving. Deke smiles and says he knew the boy wouldn't act proud. The two leave together, both smiling. Park Hanul thinks Deke is strong both as a divine being and as a person. He vows to grow strong enough one day to call him brother without hesitation. Soon, people begin gathering for the competition. The announcer tells everyone they are at Dokdo in the Eastern Ocean. Even before the first match starts, the contestants' energy can already be felt. Then it's explained that the event will work like past tournaments. 2 teams enter, but only one side wins. Some worry this year isn't fair because the fighters come from different worlds. Park Han-yul watches Deke thinking how he barely showed any sign of injury just a few hours ago. Before it begins, representatives from each nation send greetings to the Water Dragon King and ask for his understanding since the contest is being held in his territory. Then several women begin changing part of the sea between Korea and Japan, linking the 2 islands. This is the sage's power. By syncing with the water dragon's strength, they create a new space. The higher-ups pick the fighters, and each one was checked to make sure they met the rules set by the representatives. A masked woman steps forward, introducing herself as Shiva and promising to judge the matches fairly and with honor. She swears to protect Yua with her life until a winner is decided. Then another masked figure appears, Odin, and makes the same vow to judge with fairness and honor. He also promises to guard the 7 branches with his life until the contest ends. Right then, the protagonist's bag starts glowing, and the boy realizes that Masked Man must be carrying the sword tied to the power of the 7 branches, since it's reacting to his axis. The case holding the sword suddenly opens, and the weapon starts moving like it's alive. Odin quickly holds it back and apologizes, saying the sword has a fierce spirit and goes wild whenever it senses a worthy rival. Still, he admits this reaction is odd because the sword's owner no longer exists. After that, Odin apologizes again for interrupting the event. Yua notes that if even that broken sword still carries the blacksmith's divine power, then its maker must have known just how strong that spirit was. Parkanil realizes that weapon has to be the broken sword. It got that name because its blade is so strong it shatters any other weapon. They say it was forged from the bones of Valhalla's humans, who were known for great strength and battle skill. He figures Odin must have been suppressing the sword's power. If not, it might have flown straight at him because of its link to his axis. That means the masked man must have noticed someone there with enough power to make the sword respond. Then the first fighter is announced, Li Ung, and his opponent is a celestial immortal. Someone sits beside the protagonist and says it's a shame. It's Go Hee Enhwa. The boy asks what she means, and she tells him to keep watching. She hates explaining things. When he turns to the arena, Li Ung's opponent summons a Kamaitashi. The weasels rush in, and Liung blocks before trying to strike back at the celestial immortal, but the Kamaitashi loops back and lands another hit before he can do anything. The sight leaves the protagonist shocked. Park Hanyul realizes the celestial immortal adapted and got stronger in just seconds. Go Hee Hanwha smiles and asks if he gets it now. He's probably wondering how that opponent is winning without holding a weapon, but on that side, energy itself is a weapon. This match is also showing the gap between Korean and Japanese abilities with even the royal family watching. The real goal is to leave a lasting image, Koreans defeating the Japanese. At first, Li Young was just another piece in that plan. Even so, he manages to get back up after the Kamitachi's attacks. He's already taken heavy damage, and the wound keeps bleeding badly, making his condition drop fast. The announcer starts wondering if Korea is about to lose the very first match. Li Young tries to fight back, but before he can act, the weasels hit him again with ease. This time, he's too hurt to keep going and collapses. The announcer declares the first match a win for the Japanese side. Go Hee Hanwha turns to Park Han-yul and says he should be glad. Now the Japanese won't expect much from him. She says with confidence that he can win his match. To stand out, they have to be the best. Park Hanyul gets up, says he'll do his best, and adds that he knows he'll win. As he steps into the arena, the announcer mentions he became famous after the Gwangwaman incident, the same celestial immortal who beat Li Young sneers, calling him another fool and mocking how weak they are. Park Hanyul instantly rushes him and drives a punch straight into his face. Everyone watching is left speechless. Park Hanyul just beat his Japanese opponent with one hit. Some warn him to be careful, saying a reckless charge like that is dangerous. Duke disagrees. To him, the move was clean, and the girl asks how throwing yourself at an enemy with no guard up could count as technique. Duke says it absolutely is. That's the way the protagonist learned to fight. Park Hanyul then takes one of his drugs, boosting his cells and increasing blood production. He thinks it'll help him endure more, though something to stop bleeding would have been a smarter choice. Another Japanese fighter steps into the ring. Park Hanyul gives her a killing stare, and it clearly shakes her. Even so, she says she won't hold back. Then she summons giant samurai statues. He quickly figures out she's using them to keep him from getting close. He tightens his fist, and she assumes he's about to use that same punch again, but she's ready. Instead, one of her statues gets grabbed by a wooden giant. That's when she realizes he can summon a familiar too. The protagonist declares he'll handle this the Korean way. He chooses to use the power of sound and starts with a military chant, then he sings a Korean military song. The crowd wonders why he's singing, but Park Hanyul recites lyrics telling them not to fear retreat and to face the enemy because the country's fate is in their hands. As those words ring out, the wooden giants attack one of the samurai. The girl tries to stop it, but the samurai's head is crushed. Park Hanyul smiles. His plan worked. The whole crowd is stunned because Park has now won 2 matches in a row. He thinks that, in a fight, he can't show everything he has. If he does, the next opponent will already know his style, and this competition is just a show for the Yua family and the others. Li Young got stuck playing the humiliating role of sacrifice, but Park still has no plan to fool around because he intends to be the star of this show. The announcer says 2 Japanese immortal-level fighters have already been beaten, and now Park will face a pure immortal. The question is whether he can win again. Looking at the man in the arena, people guess he might be a shinobi. Park Han-yeol can tell right away that this man's aura is different from a celestial immortal's, so he assumes the announcer is right, a true, pure immortal. The man immediately throws kunai, and Park Han-yeol summons wooden dolls to block them. They explode, and the man comes in again, forcing Park Han-yeol to barely dodge. Then the kunai explode a second time, blasting him into the air. As the man moves in for another strike, Park Han-yeol casts a spell to escape, grumbling that he nearly got sliced in half. That means he'll have to hit back much harder, so he fires a spell at the shinobi. Annoyed, the bear complains that Park Han-yeol left him alone with that guy, but the boy just smiles. The bear asks who the shinobi is and why he wants to fight him. Park Han-yeol says he'll explain later. After noticing the crest on the man's clothes, he realizes the shinobi belongs to the Suzuki clan, one of the few who wear the pride of the three-legged crow. So the bear says he'll take his anger out on the shinobi instead, adding that a pure immortal is no match for him. He launches a non-stop barrage at the shinobi, and the man's armor starts to melt. The bear grins. Sure, this will be easy. He goes in for the finishing blow, but Park Han-yeol suddenly tells him to stop. A second later, something strange happens. The melted armor starts moving toward the bear. It isn't normal steel at all. This magic armor made from flexible metal. The bear calls to the protagonist for help, saying he needs cold energy. Park Han-yeol seems to get an idea and says he'll send it right away. Watching this, the spirit says the energy feels familiar and seems shocked. Then a giant spirit appears in front of him. Panicked, the bear asks who sent that thing there, begging it to at least say that the protagonist's technique is lighting up the whole area. Soon after, the shinobi shows up in tears, staring hard at Park Han-yeol. Park figures that should be enough. Losing is already humiliating, and the man looks exhausted, so he'll probably surrender. But it isn't the shinobi who speaks. A woman beside him steps in. A heavy aura spreads from her as she says this is only a match, a peaceful event made by both sides, so there's no reason to risk the lives of two talented fighters over it. Park Han-yeol stays quiet and watches. Meanwhile, two of his companions observe the scene too. The protagonist realizes that means this man isn't allowed to die here. She adds that he's sickly and had been lent to the sanctuary. Then the woman says she's ashamed. She pitted one of the fighters and interfered in their battle. Because of that, they have the right to pull their participant from the match. Park Han-yeol looks surprised. Yua thanks them for their effort and announces that the young man has now won 3 straight matches. She says she never expected him to have such amazing skill and so many useful items. Park Han-yeol thinks that even his praise, it still sounds insulting. He says he could have done much better if he'd been told about this event sooner, and the woman asks what he means. He replies that thanks to her, he may have drawn even more attention from the mortals. Then he asks if she really thinks awakened ones are just a bunch of idiots. Nearby, the shinobi keeps watching with a dark look. Seeing him, Park Han-yeol actually feels a little sorry for the guy. Not long after, he meets another girl who tells him he did well. She says it's a shame, but he just says it's fine. But the girl made it clear she wasn't talking about Park. In shows like this, people like him are just producers, skilled, sure, but easy to throw away. Park had done all he could, and he could have done even more. Still, it looked better for that boy if Park was the one who stepped back. To Park, it was like benching the best soccer player right before he won the game. After all the drama, he knew the crowd wouldn't like that choice. He admitted he didn't expect her to know about stuff like that. She said it's not seen much now, but people talk about it online all the time. When she asked if it was weird to keep up with trends, Park said, yeah, a little, but he still respected her. Just then, the announcer started introducing the next fighters. But before that could continue, the ground began to shake. A massive tsunami rose up. Standing above it, a man demanded to know where the traitors were who had insulted his palace. Park had no idea what he was talking about. Then the other girl explained they were the sons of the Water Dragon King. The man cut off any excuse. He accused them of using the tournament as cover, saying their real plan was to trade treasures out of the palace's sight. If they handed over the traitors, he'd pass on his father's message. Then he demanded the return of the 7-branch sword axis they were carrying. He added that if they apologized and showed respect, his father might forgive them and even give back the items they brought, but no one around him seemed willing to accept that. So he asked if that was their final answer. With that, he grabbed his weapon and got ready to strike, warning that they'd all be swallowed by the sea and thrown into the 7 seas. Then he released the ocean he had been holding back. Watching it all, Park knew this came out of nowhere, but he also saw a chance to fuse Axis with his sword. A moment later, he spotted the person he needed. If he could recreate the same resonance as before, it might actually work, but then a water dragon wrapped around the whole area. Dragged under, Park realized that if this kept up, he wouldn't make it. He had only one option left, so he drew a magic sword. It worked, and he felt relieved. He broke free from the water, but then he was thrown right back into the sea. Park couldn't believe he'd been dragged under again. He knew he had to escape fast. Then the area lit up. His sword had changed, and Park felt a kind of energy unlike anything he'd ever known. He wondered if this was the golden power of Axis. Maybe being sealed for so long was why the sword held such insane force. It was so strong it was even pushing back his own power. The power was simply too much, and if it kept building, his body wouldn't survive. He had to let it out, but then he froze in shock, realizing a single swing had already damaged space and time. What scared him even more was that the magic seemed to be swallowing him. He started falling into it. Sometime later, Park landed in a place he didn't recognize. He looked around, stunned, wondering where he was. He guessed the sword's huge power had made a new space-time. It was even worse than the garden gates that led to another dimension. He considered striking again to get back, but decided it was smarter to look around first. Then something hit him. Someone unfamiliar was walking toward him. Park stared for a moment, then thought it might be the shinobi from earlier. The guy had been furious enough to follow him here. Soon, the boy stepped on Park and said there were more tools in this world than he'd ever imagined. Still, he'd let Park choose which one would be used on him. Park replied that he didn't speak Japanese. The boy told him to pick for himself then. Right after that, a plant appeared beside Park. As Park pulled it up, the shinobi mocked him as a weak coward. He said Park only sent spirits to fight for him and asked if earth magic was really all he had. Even so, the shinobi was dead set on making Park eat those words. Park just asked what he was even talking about, then the plant changed into something else. The shinobi suddenly started hallucinating and dropped to the ground. Park told him he shouldn't grab whatever he sees, but then blood poured from the shinobi's mouth and he collapsed to the ground. Park said he'd killed the shinobi and that was the end of it. Then someone else appeared and called him an idiot. A new figure showed up calling Park an idiot. It was the bear in human form, complaining that every time he appeared, Park was already a mess. The bear said it was fine. Park just needed an elixir like always, but Park looked at his face and asked for the truth. The spirit admitted the hit had badly damaged one of his kidneys. Park could already feel his energy leaking away, and if it kept going, he'd lose not just his power, but his life too. The spirit reminded him again that he didn't have to carry everything alone. The bear said Deke had helped him before, so he should survive. Park's core held the power of a supreme immortal, and Deke's gift was still inside him from before the transformation. He also said Park carried the dragon's blessing, a rare power that could even wound divine and heavenly beings. Then he asked if someone who hadn't even lived 100 years already wanted to die. He joked that getting eaten by a bear would be better than dying there like a dropped sack. The bear doubted Deke would want Park to go out in such an embarrassing way. Soon after, Park apologized, and then he started fading away. Meanwhile, Yua ordered one of her servants to leave. She was already thinking that sooner or later she'd kill them all. To her, those people understood nothing. They had to be savages because the East Sea belonged to her. Yua said she'd even shown kindness by getting rid of that man, and now they were pointing their blades at her. Remembering what he said, she doubted the Dragon King would ruin his heavenly war with such a stupid lie. She wondered where that old serpent had heard something like that. He was trying to make a hero in the middle of that celestial war. Even if her plan to be worshipped by humans had failed, it still wasn't a total loss. So for now, they just had to wait. Soon enough, all the heads of the bastard sea would be brought to her. Later, Park woke up and wondered how long he'd been out. When he checked his energy flow, he figured his lower core would recover soon. As his mind cleared, he tried to understand what was happening. Why did he have horns now, and why were his senses so sharp? Still, he guessed not much time had passed since everything happened. His body also felt much cleaner than he expected. From the way things looked, someone had been taking care of him. He guessed it was probably the bear and son, Benim. He wondered if he was still in the same place. He had used the magic pearl with the bamboo fan to make that barrier, so Son Benim might have put herself in danger to look after him. After opening the door, Park went looking for her, then something stopped him cold. He couldn't believe the place had turned into a forest. He'd made a shield there with his plants, but now the trees were huge, which made him think a long time had passed. Looking off to the side, he saw nothing beyond the barrier but destruction. He guessed those marks came from a battle involving that girl. Now he just wondered where she was. Then he heard a sound. He hurried toward it, only to stop in surprise. There was a house there, and nearby a blue creature was sneaking around. Park quickly realized it was his spirit. It had grown a lot. Park asked why his own spirit seemed scared of him, then guessed it was probably the horns. A second later, the spirit lunged at him. Park dodged with ease and told it not to bite its owner. That's when the creature seemed to recognize him as its master and stopped fighting at once. Park said it was actually pretty cute. Even after eating the magic pearl, its energy hadn't changed much, probably because it was using that power to heal its inner core. Then Park noticed something else. His clothes were lying nearby. He wondered if there was anything there he could use. He also found a scroll. As he read it, he wondered if it was Japanese and guessed it might be one of the shinobi's scrolls. From what the spirit said during the tournament, the crow crest of the Suzuki clan was one of Yagurasu's secrets. So Park figured these clothes had belonged to the shinobi. He wondered if they were the kind that could transform because that alone made them interesting. Then he noticed something else. He paused, trying to figure out what it was. The feeling was coming from the same place where he'd sensed signs of battle. When he spotted a group there, he wondered why they were trying to break through the barrier. Their hair color and clothes looked familiar, making him think they were from this place. Then he saw something that shocked him. It looked just like the Goblin Club Gwonak had given him before. That was enough for him to realize they were goblins. He never expected goblins to live inside a space made by a 7-branch sword, so he guessed this was their home. Now he wondered if they were trying to invade his territory. Noticing the goblins were trying to break the barrier, Park decided he had to stop them. Then something caught him off guard. A person stepped out from behind the monsters. They demanded to know who he was. Park faced them without backing down. He asked which one of them was the leader. The commander politely introduced himself as then asked to be taken to the owner of the sword. Park had no idea what he meant and asked why he wanted that person. Too warned that only the sword's owner could enter this place. If Park refused to say where that person was, he would kill him. Park refused and told him to explain first. How could he answer if he didn't even know what this was about? The goblin said he wanted to find that man and punish him. Their king had promised that someone worthy would come with the sword, but that person never appeared. Park still didn't understand everything, but it was clear the 7-branch sword was tied to this place. The goblin, fed up, said they had waited for generations, carrying that promise over and over until they were sick of it. Whoever was worthy of the sword deserved punishment. He demanded to be taken there now and threatened to cut off Park's head if he refused. Park stayed quiet and read the situation. Then he asked if they had seen a red bear nearby. The goblin said he had ordered it to undo the barrier, but it disobeyed, so they locked it up in one of their facilities. Hearing that made Park furious, but he kept himself under control. At least now he knew where the bear was. He told them he was the sword's owner, but the goblin laughed and called him a liar, saying if Park wanted a beating, he should just ask. Park was stunned by that answer. The goblin kept mocking him, saying he was too small and looked like he'd never fought in his life. Embarrassed, Park muttered that they were idiots. The goblin then told him to leave if he wasn't going to open the barrier. They'd spare him as long as he stayed out of the way. That only made Park angrier as he grabbed his magic weapon and said they were looking down on him. Getting ready to strike, he told his spirit to spit at them. The goblins were caught off guard, then panicked and ran. In the middle of the chaos, Park warned that he'd make them spit out even more red beans. They begged him not to, and Park realized these creatures really hated red beans. He asked if their leader was strong. They said yes, she was unmatched with a staff. Park wasn't convinced that skill with a staff alone meant real strength, so he pressed for more. And the goblin added that she also had a golden treasure. Right then, a voice cut in and said he didn't need to know anymore. A scarlet-haired figure appeared above them. She called the goblins fools for trusting a stranger, and Park guessed she was their leader. She scolded her subordinates for dragging her there and said their stupidity would get them locked up for 10 years. Then she trapped them inside a divine item. Park guessed that was the treasure they mentioned, and if she led them, she was probably dangerous. So he decided to start with red beans. He attacked first, but she dodged with ease. She praised the move, saying it might work on her underlings, just not on her. Then she called her spirits out of the artifact. Park was surprised by how strong she was and knew he had to be careful. He readied another technique and sent his spirit after her. A fierce fight broke out. The goblin leader asked what he thought of her skills, adding that she hadn't had this much fun in a long time. Park didn't answer. Instead, he remembered someone once saying a staff like hers could do anything, but right now that sounded less like a boast and more like the truth. The bear spirit had called it a goblin staff, able to do whatever its user imagined. Goblins didn't think deeply, so they fought by instinct instead of planning. They also had amazing bodies and strong bones, and with enough will, they could have ruled the world. Back in the present, Park wondered if this leader simply imagined better than the fools he met before. She wasn't scared of his red beans at all, so he had to think fast. A glance at the barrier gave him an idea, but before he could act, the goblin leader noticed and attacked, forcing Park to barely block her strike. She snapped at him for looking anywhere but at her during a fight. Park said nothing as he broke her attack, then spun behind her with a counter, but she barely escaped. The leader summoned her spirits again and landed a hit on Park. An explosion went off, sending him crashing to the ground. She asked if he'd finally hit his limit and if it was time to end this, then she told him to start begging. All of her spirits rushed at him, and she planned to trap him with the bear once he started screaming. But Park got back up, saying the one who laughs last laughs best. He summoned wooden golems, each carrying jars full of red beans. They dumped the beans all over the goblin leader, and she was shocked, but her artifact absorbed everything. Park said she'd been waiting for him to scream, but that was her big mistake. He grabbed the artifact and ordered the bear to come out. The spirit popped out at once, saying it knew Park would save it. Then it complained that Park was an idiot for leaving it trapped long enough to get sad. Park asked how long it had been stuck there, and the bear said more than 150 days. Time moved differently in this world, but not by much. Park said they needed to get out fast if that was true. After that, he released the goblins from the artifact and asked if the woman really was their leader. She looked him over and said he was short but broad-shouldered. That left Park flustered, and he shot back that he was average height. The goblin said size didn't matter and that her mother used to say the same. At first, she hadn't believed it, but Park had beaten her. Then she decided he was smart and not bad-looking, so she asked him to marry her. Park was completely speechless. Even the spirit started wondering if Park was really about to get married and how that would even work. Still confused, Park asked what she was talking about. The bear asked if he still hadn't figured out that the goblins were tied to the seven-branched sword. Remembering the prophecy, Park thought this must be the promise about a man one day coming with that sword, so they had probably been waiting for someone worthy to marry her. Park said it had nothing to do with him, and the person meant to come with the seven-branched sword was probably already dead. But the bear pointed out that the woman clearly didn't see it that way. Park thought he was too young for this and wanted to wake up from what felt like a bad dream. Instead, he demanded to know where she hid the sword and threatened to stuff her with so many red beans her stomach would burst if she stayed quiet. He ordered her to talk now, but she refused, saying she wouldn't hand over the sword until she'd had 3 children with him. Park immediately told them to bring more red beans. Watching all this, the bear said that probably wouldn't get him anywhere. Park admitted goblins were insanely stubborn, so forcing an answer out of her would be hard. The bear asked why he didn't just marry her then. They'd been trapped there so long they probably didn't understand things normally, and he couldn't force them anyway. Besides, that artifact was their greatest treasure. Since time moved differently here, the bear suggested Park could marry her and stay a while. Park realized this approach wasn't getting him anywhere, so instead of threatening her, he decided to try bribery. A little later, the goblin woman started waking up. She was tied up and food had been placed in front of her. Park noticed she was awake just as she repeated that she wouldn't say anything until he married her. Park told her that changed nothing. He said she could think it over while he ate. Then he started talking about how good the rice cakes were. Watching him eat made her crave them badly, and she admitted she wanted one. Park tossed a piece into her mouth and she instantly loved it. She begged for another. With a sly grin, Park watched her gobble them down. Even then, she insisted this didn't mean she'd changed her mind. They still had to have 3 children. While she kept chewing, Park mentioned there were only 2 rice cakes left. Her eyes filled with tears as she begged for just one more. Park picked up another, leaving only one, and started eating it. That crushed the goblin, and she sadly muttered that she only wanted to marry someone. Park said they could marry someday, just not now. She didn't buy it and accused him of meaning 100 years later, which was way too long for her. Holding out another plate, Park said he'd give it to her. He said he could even teach her how to make that food herself. With the plate in her hands, the goblin finally seemed to agree. Park figured waiting until he was 120 to marry wouldn't be so bad. A bit later, she cast a spell and brought out a strange chest. Park asked if it was a treasure box, but she said she wasn't sure. Her mother had just passed it down to her. Then she looked around for something, found it, and handed it to Park, telling him to take it. She said it was a sign of their engagement. Park asked what it was, and she told him they were seeds. That only made him more confused. What was he supposed to do with seeds? Then his expression changed in surprise. These days, hardly anyone cared about the old stories of the Decobis. Most people just wanted to stand out. So if they got their hands on something like this, goblins, though, are honest about wanting to keep what they like. They trade skills and items pretty freely, but if someone has a rare talent, they won't give it up easily. That's why dealing with them can get messy fast. So the easiest way to negotiate with goblins is to offer something they're good at or really want. Taking the seed, the bear said it had to be valuable somehow. He told Park to ask the goblin about it. Park wondered if he was really allowed to keep something that precious. He called out to the goblin, and she sweetly answered him as love. Park asked where the seeds came from. She said her grandmother brought them from her old world before coming here. She went on to say the seed originally belonged to one of the ministers she mentioned before. That man was known for growing herbs and medicine plants, and he could travel between worlds. But one day he was ordered to cure a sickness that couldn't be cured. He failed, got locked up, and was left to starve. Before dying, he gave the seed to her grandmother for hiding the rest of his family. Park asked if the man had been a herbalist. Hearing that, Park realized the book he'd been trying to read for making medicine was probably that man's. The goblin added that the herbalist had served someone incredibly powerful, a man who used a sword and rode a horse and whose pride was said to reach the heavens. That arrogance eventually led to his fall. She wondered if there had been a war back then and things turned ugly, so he gave the seed to her grandmother to get his family away from the battlefield. Park asked if that madman had dragged his own family into war, and she said yes. He couldn't bear losing them. That said plenty about him. Park lingered on the word loss. To him, that felt even worse than pain. The woman got up and asked if they could keep going, but Park told her to slow down. Then she picked up her staff again. She started striking Park with it. To his surprise, it didn't hurt at all. She explained she was putting something into him. Park said he didn't feel any different, but the goblin told him to relax. He'd understand how to use it later. Looking at the chest, Park thought the only thing left now was the 7-branch sword. When he opened the box, the sacred sword was inside. The bear said a sword that powerful should hold a huge amount of energy, but this one felt different. Since its main nature was wood, Park had no reason to hesitate. Park answered that wood's opposite was earth. Even so, the bear warned him not to stop no matter what happened. Seeing the energy rising, the bear told him to do it anyway. Park grabbed the sword, and a huge beam of light swallowed him. He struggled to control it. The bear shouted for him not to let go no matter what. Annoyed, Park snapped back, asking if the bear thought he couldn't handle the sword's power. The bear was stunned. He said he'd never seen Park like this before, especially with that much energy pouring out of him. Then the sword suddenly settled down. The bear called it amazing. It felt like an elite general spirit was guiding the blade with Park, and that proved just how incredible the 7-branch sword really was. Park thought he'd moved on pure instinct when he grabbed it, like he'd used the sword for years. He guessed that was the talent she had given him. Then he asked the goblin if she wanted to marry him right then. After that, the story cuts back to the city and Park's world. The cheerful spirit said the whole thing had been really fun. Park, meanwhile, thought it had been a long time since he'd been back in Korea. He had wanted to call his spirit earlier, but after using too much power fighting the goblin leader, he couldn't make it to Bear Mountain and had to stop at the nearest city instead. He'd thought the goblin would come with him, but she was still way too reckless. It had already been 7 months since his competition, and people were still talking about it. On top of that, the Dragon King of the East Sea still hadn't come back. Civilians and reporters started attacking the East Sea's invasion, and also slammed Korea's 3 princesses for staying silent. A month later, the Dragon King finally showed up and apologized, saying it was all a mistake caused by bad information. Even then, people still couldn't forgive either side. The bear asked what happened with the dragons of the West and South Seas. Park said he didn't want to get dragged into that. They might not have supported the East Sea at all. The spirit said it was obvious. They just wanted to stir things up. The dragons didn't get along well, though they had once joined forces during a war between humans and mortals. Even so, Park knew there was still one big problem where the seven-branch sword had gone. All they knew was that the sword's guardian had informed the Nordic Administrative Council he would stay in Korea and help suppress the East Sea. Park figured this was probably because he had grabbed the sword and crossed into another dimension. That man was incredibly strong and clearly tied to the sword, so knowing he was searching for it made Park even more desperate to get it back. The bear said the East Sea had been unbelievably foolish if even ordinary humans were now glaring at them in anger. A moment later, a message popped up saying their time using the system was over and thanking them for choosing it. The bear then asked what they were doing next, and Park said they needed to head to Wanak Mountain. He was sure people had him listed as missing or dead, so if he suddenly showed up, the garden would get suspicious. Because of that, he planned to stay hidden and watch until things calmed down. The bear said that once they got there, he wanted to check on his original body since it had been a long time since he'd felt its energy. Right after entering the goblin's dimension, he thought he'd sense it again once they returned, but he felt nothing, and that was starting to worry him. Startled, Park asked if the bear really hadn't felt his body's energy for 7 months. If so, that was serious, and they needed to leave right away, so they headed for the mountain immediately. Sometime later, they reached the area and were shocked by what they found. The tree had grown ridiculously large, and it was covered in beehives. Park asked how those bees had gotten through the barrier. The bear said it wasn't a big deal. Once in a while, an insect could slip through. Then Park noticed something in the branches and asked what it was. The bear could hardly believe it because another bear was resting underneath. Stunned, he said his original body was acting very strangely, and he had no idea what was going on. A moment later, the bees started swarming them. Park quickly pulled out his scroll and artifact, which called forth all of his spirits. He ordered them to attack, and the fight with the bees began. But there were just too many of them, and Park realized they were hard to kill even with his powers, so he needed something stronger. Then the bear took on his true form and charged at the swarm. Park told him to hold on, but the spirit said he could burn them all away himself. If not for the hive, he would have used his full power, but he couldn't risk damaging the tree since bees were all over it. So he wondered if there was some other way to clear them off. Park started thinking of a plan that might work. Watching the bees on the ground, he noticed they still weren't dead even after being hit, and that gave him an idea. Park quickly told the bear to wait, then asked him to move aside. Right after that, he threw something in front of the bees. That brought them down, and the rest fled from the tree, smashing into the barriers. Seeing that, Park let out a relieved breath. He said the barrier had worked. The bear, surprised, said he had no idea how those bees ended up there. He said it was only a guess, but there was an old story that the Queen of the West once built something called Golden Peak on a mountain. She hadn't appeared in a long time, but the Queen of the West was a goddess from Chinese myth, seen as a fairy who carried immortality potions. Pointing at the tree, Park asked if that was why this had happened. The bear said that long ago, some wandering bees were searching for a place to live, smelled the spot, and settled in the tree. Getting up, Park figures the bees are gone now that the smoke inside the barrier has cleared. He asked the spirit if they should check. The two head over to the tree. They open a hive packed with honey, and the spirit says this isn't normal honey. It's full of pure energy. He adds that they can store it too. Park wonders if they can keep making honey here since he might use it to brew a very strong elixir. Looking through the comb, he finds bee larvae still alive inside and says they're loaded with nutrients that help growth. So he tries one to see if that's true. Right away, the system says he consumed a drug called royal jelly, which boosts his growth. Park makes a face, saying he expected it to taste sweeter if it had honey in it. The bear stares at him and asks why his head is glowing. Seeing the horns, he guesses Park might be a dragon's son. Shaken, he asks what's going on, and Park says it's probably from the draconic power he absorbed. The bear says that still doesn't explain why he's starting to look like a dragon by birth. Park can only say weird things keep happening lately, and the bear already saw the mark on him before. The spirit looks at the scar, calls it strange, and asks if he's alright. Park asks if he knows what it means, but the bear admits he has no idea. He explains that dragons are born with water power from nature and train with it for thousands of years, which is why they're such legendary beings. Humans are different. They can handle more kinds of natural elements. So if someone were both human and draconic, they could become something almost impossible to measure. That means Park might turn into a creature the world has never seen. The bear says carrying that much power must be rough, but Park answers that he hasn't fully awakened yet, which makes it even harder to control. The bear says his horns grew because his core took in that power. If he absorbs more, he could become a full dragon. But since he's still human, there may be side effects. He adds that if Park really turns into a dragon, he may have to live in water. That makes Park seriously think about becoming one. If his horns are growing, then maybe he really can absorb water power. And if he leaves the larvae here safely, they could become new bees, make more honey, and give him even more larvae later. So Park says he wants to learn to use his power better. Thanks to the pill that woman gave him, his energy stopped going wild and increased a lot. Since that elixir had the wood element, it felt like hope. He wants to understand which elements support or clash with his because some elixirs do nothing for him, probably because of wood. If he uses one that opposes wood, he might gain the other effects without taking too much damage. The bear says that sounds smart and asks what he plans to study. Park answers by pulling something out. He takes several notes from his backpack and says they include books left by the Celestial Wolf's disciple, plus a scroll from that shinobi family. Since he doesn't have much else to do here, he figures this is a good time to learn. Picking up one scroll, he says he really wants to master that shinobi technique, and with the 7-branch sword, he can already use 3 legendary items he owns. The bear says he has good gear and a solid plan. Now he just needs to train and stay unnoticed. Park says one thing still bothers him, though. He still hasn't delivered the black jade to his brother, Daioki. The bear asks why he never handed over the sprout during all the times they met and why he cares so much about giving it to that boy. He says the kid is smart and knows he wants to turn the jade sprout into a flute. But does Park really think that can be done? He doubts something that dangerous could work as an instrument. Then he calls Park an idiot and says he actually knows someone who can make it and do it right. Surprised, Park asks if he really knows a blacksmith who can forge a flute. The bear says even if he does, he wouldn't want to hand it over to Daioki. Park tells him to calm down. He's interested in that flute too. The bear asks if he means that, and Park says yes. He'll give it to Daioki's brother. To him, using it himself or delivering it wouldn't change much anyway. The bear accepts and says they'll leave right away. The smith he wants to introduce is called the God of Fire. Long ago, he settled a debt involving his nephew and sister. That's why they're heading to Mount Kwa. When Park asks where it is, the bear says it's in North Korea. Park is stunned, then asks if the bear is North Korean and if the boy really has a sister. The bear says Park has it wrong. The mountain named after his sister isn't that other mountain, and he isn't that place's spirit. Still, his nephew is called Dangon, and according to the woman, 3 great powers rule the whole North Korean peninsula. It seems the bear's sister is in Azadal on Mount Kwa. After some time, Park and the bear reach their destination. Park can hardly believe it. They're really in North Korea. The bear says this is one of the strongest places in the country. Park asks why he can't see anything. Back in human form, the bear tells him to stay close. Park says it still feels far away, but the spirit tells him they're already there. Then Park notices something and freezes. 2 giant statues stand before him. They speak, asking who they are because Azadal doesn't allow uninvited guests. The spirit tells Park to say the red bear from Mount Gwanak has come to visit. The statue tells them to wait, and the bear adds that he brought a snack. Park is impressed. The guards got tense as soon as they heard who he was, and now the bear really does seem like someone important. Even so, Park still can't sense the place itself. Then he suddenly stumbles, saying he feels dizzy, shocked by what appears next. A huge city is right in front of him. Park realizes the village was hidden with magic and wonders how so many people live here. The bear says not everyone inside is kind like him. So before hiding Azadal from the human world, they chose who was worthy to stay. There's one rule. Even life and death belong to his nephew who decides who gets to live there. Park thinks that sounds a lot like the so-called Great Leader of the Northern Paradise. A group approaches and says the leader wants to see the spirit. The bear quickly asks which leader. The man says the Great Mother is waiting at the main house, then asks about Park. The spirit calls him a trusted subordinate. Satisfied with that answer, the man tells them to follow. A while later, they head deeper inside together. With Park apparently blindfolded, the guide says they've arrived. Still unable to see, Park assumes this must be the main house. He says the palace here is beautiful, though something about the place feels off. Then a girl appears in front of him. She steps forward and thanks them for coming, apologizing if her request caused trouble. The guide leaves, leaving only Park, the spirit, and the woman. She says it's been a long time and that she missed him very much. Then she hugs the bear in human form, saying her brother hasn't changed at all since he vanished without a word, and she'd been worried sick. In a tense voice, she says he must be tired from traveling so far and should get some rest. At that point, Park starts to understand what's going on. The girl tells him not to worry. It's only temporary. She asks if he's scared of her, saying she's the only family her brother has left since there's still beasts from the forest. But what really interests her is Park. Why is a dragon here serving as her brother's subordinate? Park removes his mask and says monster would be a better word. A little later, they sit down to talk, and Park Han-yeol explains how they ended up there. Eun-myo says she understands. Even so, the story sounds way too wild to her, so she asks if he's lying. He says no. Wonok trusted him, and that's why he was brought here. A lot happened, and he had to keep the fact that he was a monster hidden. That's why they came looking for help and answers. She takes a breath and says she understands, but sadly, the fire deity isn't here. That catches Park Han-yeol off guard. Eun-myo awkwardly explains that he already left Essedal, though he still cared about his family. So if they brought him an offering, he would respond with his flute. Park Han-yeol then asks why Wonok sent them all this way if the fire deity had been gone for so long. She says he's probably figured it out already, which makes him listen closer. Eun-myo explains that her brother likely brought them here because he wants Essedal to take Park in. More than that, he may want the boy to take the throne that will soon be empty. On the flying base, Deok and Yu sit in silence. She asks what's on his mind, and he brushes it off as nothing. Yu then asks if he isn't happy to be part of the meeting since he said he wanted to lead the attack on the East Sea. Deok says that after the Sea Dragon King attacked them and they lost the seven-branch sword, their side kept taking heavy damage. A lot of innocent people died because of it too, so he can't forgive them. No matter what, he plans to make them pay. Yua warns him not to get reckless. The sea creatures are enemies now, and they have to wipe them out completely. If he talks like that again, she'll strip him of command. Deok chooses to follow her orders. Yua thinks about how everyone agreed on the subjugation. Once the EC falls, a new dragon must take the empty throne, and depending on who that is, the result could be beyond their control. The only comfort is that there aren't many dragons, so they can't let just anyone grab that power. What they need is a new dragon child they can keep under control. Park Han-yeol asks Eun-myo to help hide that he's a dragon and let him leave Essedal safely. She says the simplest path to peace would be taking the Dragon King's throne. He answers that even then, they'd still treat him like a dog, and what he hates most is living as someone else's puppet. Lowering his head, he asks her for advice on what to do next. He says he's never really had people he could trust, and Eun-myo admits that makes her feel sorry for both him and her brother. Park Han-yeol looks up and asks what she means. She says she won't let her brother leave again. Back when he first left Essedal, she tried everything to stop him because even if he chose to protect Mount Wonok, it was sad watching him throw everything away and become so miserable. Park Han-yeol says he could give up his freedom to pay that price, but she rejects that idea. Eun-myo explains that to claim the Eastern Throne, his core has to be filled with water energy. Only the sea itself can do that, otherwise those thrones wouldn't exist, and right now he still seems weak. Still, she can help. Through her connection to one of the Dragon Kings, she knows a place that could strengthen him, and she's willing to tell him. There, he can build up the energy in his core and sync with the water. Park Han-yeol thinks he needs to leave before Wonok wakes up, but he still wants to say goodbye first. He tells her he'll never forget what she's doing for him. 3 days later, Park is stunned by what he finds. He has reached the throne of Mount Baektu, and the energy there is unlike anything he's felt before. As he looks over the water, he wonders if there are cores inside the lake. He dives in. To his surprise, he can still breathe, and his body feels light, almost like he belongs there. When he reaches the bottom of the lake, he finds something glowing and realizes this must be it. Just getting close lets him feel water energy gathering around him. So he moves in, thinking this might make him stronger, but it's harder than he expected. Then a burst of energy erupts, yet it doesn't hurt him. Instead, he feels changed, like that power has settled inside him. His thoughts stop when he senses something coming. He remembers Eun-myo's warning that once the seal was removed, anyone who sensed that energy would show up, and they'd likely be beings more in tune with water than he was. Park Han-yeol mutters that they came too fast. When he breaks the surface, a huge creature is waiting. He refuses to back down and attacks at once, but the monster blocks him easily. A moment later, lightning slams into him. Then a second serpent appears, mocking him for carrying dragon energy he can't even control. The first says that if they eat him, they might evolve too, but then both monsters notice Peach Blossoms where he fell. Park Han-yeol is still on his feet. The serpent grins and says those flowers make it look like he's setting up his own funeral. But when they attack again, a peach tree suddenly rises and pulls the lightning into itself. Park smiles. His plan worked. The serpents are stunned. Park Han-yeol asks if they still think it's his funeral. Seeing her brother get angry, the female serpent says she'll handle it, then fires off attacks made of crystal. Park destroys them in midair with his scroll. She starts thinking they should run before this gets worse, but before she can speak, she notices her brother has already fled. Once the clash ends, Park drops his scroll and starts coughing. He used too much power without thinking, but he couldn't afford to lose. If he failed here, he might never get a chance like this again. The serpents keep running, but Park suddenly appears in front of them, leaving them shocked. The female serpent blurts out, asking how he got there. She calls him a pest and snaps that she won't let him come any closer. Park starts gathering power for another attack, and she can't believe what she's seeing. A second later, she turns and tries to flee. Staring her down, Park tells her to come back and lands a hit. The serpent can't understand how he's doing this. She apologizes to her brother, saying if she stays, she'll die, then tries to escape for real, thinking her dream of becoming a dragon and gaining a throne's power is over. But Park appears beside her and asks where she thinks she's going. The plant he used to trap the two serpents was a sacred one from the garden, raised for combat since ancient times and empowered by the fox spirit. Caught in it, the serpent begs her brother to save her, while Park stares at what's appeared before him. He wonders what kind of place this is, guessing it might be some sort of palace that only revealed itself now that he had the core, so he decides to check it out. The serpent suddenly starts laughing, then quickly begs him not to kill her and to remove the black garden bamboo because the pain is too much. Park agrees, but warns that if she tries anything, he'll blow her head off. He orders her to tell the truth and asks if more ocean serpents are here. She hurriedly says they came when the barrier opened, so there should be 4 more nearby. Park asks how they knew the barrier had opened, and she says they're tied to this place. She and her brother were servants here, and because of that, they still had a master. But that master died 6,000 years ago, so they spent all that time training to replace him. Park realizes this could be useful. He says he'll remove the black garden bamboo if she guides him to the palace. She asks if that means they'll be free too, since staying like this is uncomfortable. Then she changes into a beautiful woman and introduces herself as Herrick. Park tells her to lead the way. The girl returns looking sad, saying it's a shame she and her brother ended up like this, though she's glad they're still alive. Inside the palace, they stop in front of a huge door. Herrick explains that everything in this place moves with the core, and the water bearer can use it freely. After her old master died, it became a sacred site, so no one unworthy could enter or open the barrier. Park thinks the strangest part is that outside, there was water and fish floating in it, almost like he could build a garden there. As they keep walking, the serpent tells him this is the Dragon Palace vault, and only the core bearer can open it. Everything her master owned is stored inside. Park casts a spell and says they should check the place properly. A moment later, the vault opens. Inside, everything is spotless. Then he notices a huge bookshelf and is caught off guard. At first glance, the books don't look special. But once he opens one, he sees it's a martial arts manual. The serpent, still in human form, explains these are dragon techniques, and her old master had mastered every one of them. Park asks what she and her brother had been training all this time if they wanted to take over this place. She says most creatures found masters to guide them, but after their master died, she and her brother had no one, so they just trained however they could. Park realizes that's why she was so desperate to come back. If what she said was true, they might even become dragons by learning these techniques the right way. So he lets them study the books, but only if they serve under him. She agrees right away and says she'd be happy to. Park hands her a book and says that's her first job, then tells her to get ready for guests. Seeing how natural she looks as a human, he wonders if all sea creatures can transform like that. He also gets curious about what her brother looks like in human form. Sometime later, a man sits at a table with a drink. Park thinks he never expected a god like this to meet him in person. Even as just a pure immortal, his dragon energy earns him respect, so Yu is treating him seriously. The man asks why Park came to see him so soon after arriving at the palace. Park pulls out a piece of bamboo and says he needs a favor. The The man recognizes it as black jade sprout bamboo, and Park asks him to turn it into a flute of peace. Hearing that, the man calls him a pretty greedy young man. Park quickly says he has no bad intentions. The man tells him he doesn't need to explain. Park should calm down since making things is his job. After checking the bamboo, he says the size is good and it should make an excellent flute, so he'll do his best. Park can tell from that quick judgment that the man really is a top craftsman. Then he says there's one more thing he wants. He pulls something from a spell and a sword appears. Park had found it in the ancient Dragon King's vault. The instant he touches it, a terrible aura starts swallowing him. The energy feels wrong, not like anger, but like a thirst to kill, cold and sharp, like an assassin's urge. Park knows it's powerful, but he can't control it well enough to use. Looking at the blade, the man says there's definitely something strange about it. He reaches for the sword. Park quickly tells him to stop. He warns that this weapon isn't like an ordinary sword. Even so, the man picks it up without trouble. Park is stunned since he himself could barely keep it under control. He figures that's the skill of the world's greatest craftsman, the fire deity. The man explains the sword carries a dark force made by the northern dwarves. It's incredibly strong, but that same power can ruin its user. Still, he says it can be managed with a new scabbard. If the sheath can restrain it, the sword's energy will stay sealed until it's drawn. But there's a catch. Even if Park uses it, the blade won't rest until it draws his blood. Park says he'll remember that. The man then tells him he'll return after making both the flute and the scabbard. Afterward, Park looks through what he found and is amazed there were so many valuable things here. He still has a lot to learn, especially with the bear gone, and more knowledge never hurts. Just then, the serpent woman calls for him and says a guest has arrived. Later, an older man asks if Park is the palace's new king and introduces himself as Tabak of the immortal sacred temple. That temple came from an old story about a man on a mountain between the 8 provinces of Zhoujin. A man said to honor the nation's gods and perform rituals for them, but the real story was different. There were actually 8 mountains, each ruled by a powerful immortal. Because of that, the palace ordered the mountain to return to sacred use as a temple for the gods. Years later, that holy place was shut down. But now that Heaven's Gate has opened again, the Korean government has allowed the immortals to use the land once more, and the man standing before Park is the one in charge there, the current master of that mountain. Park greets him politely and says he should have visited first, but Tae-baek brushes it off, saying he was just passing through and decided to stop by. He adds that he brought a disciple with him. The girl introduces herself as Shin, Tae-baek's youngest disciple, and says it's nice to meet him. Park is surprised when he sees her. He tells them to come inside and sit. A little later, the 3 head further in. As they walk, Park thinks the girl has changed a lot. Now she's that priest's disciple, and the whole visit feels strange. He can't guess what Tae-baek really wants. Soon, Tae-baek asks about Park's connection to the ordinary bears. Park says they're difficult beings, but they hold countless things between heaven and earth. Even so, he owes them a lot, and he only became close to one because they had a long relationship. Tae-baek points out that Park isn't even 100 years old, yet he's already a pure immortal and owns a palace. He says very few young people rise that far that fast. Then he introduces his disciple properly, saying she's young too, highly talented, and nearly at the celestial immortal stage. Because of that, he suggests a bet. He asks Park what he thinks about training his disciple. Park asks if he means they should train together. Tae-baek says yes. They'd both enjoy sparring with each other, and maybe she could even become his wife someday. That leaves Park completely stunned. Tae-baek says that's exactly why they should start training together. The girl clearly doesn't like the idea either. Park apologizes and says he's not interested in that kind of relationship, but Tae-baek tells him not to decide too slowly. It would help his training. He adds that if it happens, Park would become his son-in-law, and he doesn't treat his sons-in-law badly, so he sets a jar on the table. Park is startled by what's inside. He realizes it could hide the truth about his unusual body, and because of that, he never looked at medicine the same way again. Staring at the jar, he says it's rare and worth a fortune. Even then, Park tells him he's already promised to marry someone. Tae-baek says he's stubborn and that 2 people tied by physical attraction can't stay as just anything else. He asks what's wrong with having more than one wife and why Park is thinking like an ordinary man. When Park looks at the girl, he sees she isn't happy about any of this. Not long after, he gives in. Feeling sorry for her, Park says he'll accept her as his student and marry her. A few days pass and they begin training. Soon, a blue cloud forms between Park's fingers, and he's pleased he pulled it off, calling it incredibly beautiful. Now that he understands the basics, he thinks he could make rain if he puts in more energy. And if the celestial demon god's art reaches 6 stars, he could mix different traits together and create a natural disaster. That excites him since he wants to hit 6 stars as soon as possible. Then the serpent woman calls for him again and says the young lady wants to eat in her room. Park decides it's time to use Tybeek's gift and tells her to send the girl in. Meanwhile, the young woman stands outside his door thinking how strange and shocking it has always been to be tied to a dragon or to marry into one of their families. Even though she doesn't want this, she believes it's all because of her master. A moment later, she opens the door and apologizes for entering. Park is lying down and asks if she's here. He says he arranged the room the way mortals like it and asks what she thinks. A little embarrassed, she thanks him for being thoughtful. Then Park asks if she really doesn't want this. From her face, it's obvious she's unhappy, and he says it's absurd for her to act like she's on equal footing with him. That's putting it mildly. So he asks if she really thought he wouldn't notice the treasure she was using or offering since her master had presented it with her, and he questions how she ever earned the title of Celestial of Bayek. Hearing that, the girl snaps in anger. She pulls her sword and warns him not to insult her master again. Park calmly calls out one of his spirits. He says this is getting interesting. A mere human dares talk down to him. Then he reminds her that he is the king and this is his palace. No matter how she comes at him, a celestial immortal can't do a thing here. The girl falls silent. A moment later, Park tells her to come with him. He has a better way to settle this. He takes out something and tells her to eat it. Looking at it, she wonders what he gave her. As she accepts it, she guesses it might be a life pill meant to protect the 8 treasures. It seems basic at first, and she doesn't think she needs it right now. Still, since Park is clearly skilled at making medicine, this one might be different. So she tries it, figuring there's no harm in tasting it once. The effect shocks her. The pill is made so well it has no smell or taste, nothing like her master's medicines. On top of that, her old internal wounds vanish, and her power starts rising. Stunned, she asks what technique he used. Park says it's simple. Top ingredients and great skill. His methods are special, so she should be glad, and that makes her master someone he can't ignore. He also makes it clear he has no plan to use the art of unlocking the scepter on her. Instead, he asks what she thinks about pretending to be husband and wife. She asks if he really believes her master wouldn't learn the truth, and Park counters by asking whether her master wouldn't want the medicine he can make. That makes her realize what he's getting at. Park says he'll keep refining pills for her, so she should hand over the blue void eye. After feeling the pill boost her strength, she has no reason to doubt him. She agrees, but asks for one promise. Since the blue eye is so valuable, he has to tell her before he uses it. Park jokes that if she ever thinks he's wasting it, she'll just run crying to her master. Then she asks what he even plans to do with it. Park answers that he's going to brew liquor with it. That leaves her stunned, and she starts wondering if giving it to him was a mistake. Sometime later, Park is already drinking what he made. He notices the medicine's raw potency dropped a little, but now it works faster, lasts longer, and is far more useful overall. Since he's tested enough, he decides it's time to make something proper with the blue eye. Not long after, the same girl shows up again. For some reason, she's drunk and starts rambling at Park. She demands he give her more, saying he promised. Fed up, Park asks his subordinate to deal with her. That only makes her madder. She complains that he can't just ignore people, then blurts out that her father is a high-ranking firefighter honored by the president. She adds that he's an old man who sneaks around thinking nobody will notice. That catches Park off guard. He realizes he may have learned something useful. Now he just needs to think of a way to use that information later. But first, he needs to make proper use of the item in front of him. A few days later, Park heads to a secluded part of his forest. He thinks it's the right place. These ingredients are so strong that their scent alone could alert the immortals of Seoul. He opens the jar, and light spills out from inside. The smell alone is enough to make him feel drunk. The drink is made from immortal peach essence, and the peaches grew bigger and sweeter thanks to fertilizer made from bee corpses. As he pours a cup, Park admits this stuff really could drive someone mad. Then he notices someone behind him, quickly puts on his mask, and thinks it may be an immortal since he never sensed the approach. The stranger tells him to relax. He's just a man who loves fine alcohol. Park then recognizes him. The elder asks if he can have a taste. That aroma is simply too tempting. Park generously offers him a cup. The man is thrilled. Calling Park generous, he gladly accepts and takes a drink. Right away, he says it's the best liquor he's ever had and that he hasn't tasted anything like it in ages. Park reminds him that he once said if he died, he'd never taste good liquor again. He also notes that the junior the man introduced to him still hasn't shown up. This elder used to wander the world, but after falling for palace liquor, he settled in the northern mountain territory. He's one of the 8 Chinese immortals, a dragon slayer who crushed evil with the celestial evasion sword. His name is Dong Bai. Park says that means he should greet the new ruler of heaven and earth, the immortal sword. But Dong Bai says his old agreement with that young man is over, so now he'll treat Park as a brother and asks if he knows that. Park asks if calling a dragon king his brother doesn't break any rules. Dong Bai admits it's awkward, but says he didn't know at first that Park was the new dragon king. Park says a man like him should know how precious this liquor is. Its aroma alone feels like the work of a genius or maybe a verdict from heaven. The elder quickly tells him to stop. He's embarrassed enough already, and he can't stand hearing any more of that. Park thinks that even if their deal started for farming, he still has to choose whether to be strict or fair about it. He then says his seniors might scold him if they heard Dong by using such a high title for him, so they should take the liquor and head together to his ancestral sanctuary. Dong Bai says that sounds perfect. He thanks Park for saving his life and says if Park ever needs help, he only has to ask. Park immediately asks for a favor. The celestial evasion sword is a legendary sword art. It was tied to the mysterious immortal Long, who became obsessed with slaying a demonic dragon. Though he used only one sword, the art was unlike normal martial techniques. It wasn't based on common power methods. Both men had mortal bodies and fought with swords, which made it even more useful to Park. So Park asks Dong Bai to teach him the sword technique, figuring there's no reason not to learn it. 2 days after leaving the demon's lair, a giant creature crawls through the area. Inside a house, a boy tells his brother everything will be okay and time will heal things. Then the creature appears, and the boy rushes toward it. Tears in his eyes, he clings tightly to his brother. Just then, Park arrives and says this place has some good fertilizer. He attacks at once and easily knocks the creature down. The boy is stunned that he's still alive. Park says he just gained more fertilizer, then notices the 2 children there. Once he understands, he realizes they were being used as sacrifices. That makes him furious. The creature gets back up and charges, shouting that it will kill him first. An explosion follows, and within seconds, the monster is beaten again. The boy had thought nobody would save them, and they were doomed, but then he freezes in shock. Park is standing over the creature, and the monster can't believe he's alive after being swallowed. Park readies another strike and carves into the beast again, saying this won't happen twice. Then he smiles, activates his special skill, vanishes, and appears above the creature in an instant. He unleashes another barrage of slashes and seems to finish it for good. Even so, Park is still frustrated because the celestial evasion technique is hard for him. He never expected his senior to train him by throwing him off a cliff, but it worked out, and with monsters gathered in this place, it became the perfect training ground. Soon after, one of the boys comes up and thanks him. Park asks if the 2 of them are from the immortal world. The boy says yes, though he himself inherited no powers. Only his family line's shamanic language remained. Then voices nearby ask who's there, and Park's spirit attacks them at once. Park stands beside the spirit watching coldly. He remembers what the boy told him. Their mother was a shaman, and after the monsters appeared, the city started offering people like them as sacrifices. After the boy's uncle was eaten, his mother tried to act by making iron, but the soldiers found out and stormed in. They brutally killed her. Angry, Park thinks she was only trying to protect the village. He puts a hand on the boy's shoulder and tells him not to cry. He'll avenge his family. Back in the present, the boy fights beside Park's spirit, smashing into the building again and again, and Park notes that the spirit has been acting more loyal lately. Maybe they finally understood the gap between them now that Park had become a dragon. The spirit also got along with the bear way better than Park expected. A moment later, the spirit comes back, carrying a man in its mouth. Park says he first thought the guy was a fairy or some kind of immortal, but he was really just a monster using a human body. And on top of that, they were all idiots. Furious, the wolf demands to know who Park is and why he came to stir up trouble in the spirit faction's territory. Park answers that he came to make them pay for the innocent people they killed. The man shoots back that the shaman must have told him. If she made that thing for their lord, then nothing could have changed. Park pauses, wondering if they really had a lord. These creatures were copying humans, building ranks of their own, and even using a human official to control the government, the public, and those children like sacrifice offerings. The man keeps talking, saying Park clearly came there to cause trouble. He mocks him, saying his message had already reached headquarters, and Park would be ripped apart for this. Park just glares at him and orders him to lead the way. He wants to see their strength for himself. The man hesitates and asks if Park is that eager to die. Sometime later, Park and his spirit fly toward the place he was told about. Driven out and pressured by the immortals, lost supernatural beings from China and South Korea had gathered in the empty land of North Korea and formed the spirit faction, now ruled by Mr. Tenga, the white tiger who had slept for over 1,000 years. He had reached the level of an 8th-class divine being. High in the air, Park spots a fight below where bodies are being eaten by beasts. He realizes they aren't just pretending to be human. They're openly eating people too. Disgusted, he prepares a spell and calls them filthy. Then he sends a spinning tornado straight at them. The creature can only stare in shock. And right after that, Park tells them to let the wolf go. The wolf panics and begs not to be thrown. Park ignores him and hurls him right into the tornado. He watches coldly until an explosion suddenly erupts. Amid the chaos, a man asks what is going on. He says a powerful being must be behind the attack. While Park is surprised the wolf escaped the tornado so easily. The wolf keeps talking, stunned because he thought Park was just some nobody who dared speak to him so casually. Then he orders his followers to attack, but a bolt of lightning instantly drops one of them. And when he turns around, the rest of his men are already defeated. Seconds later, 2 serpents appear in front of the wolf. Park says they must be hungry so they can use their strength tonight. He tells them not to keep him waiting and to end it fast.